quarters, there are bound to be challenges. We're assigned by technicians, both CUDO technicians and in-house technicians, through this meeting. And whenever you face technical challenges, please consult the technical guide and reach the operators via the chat function if required. We would be grateful for constructive suggestions and feedback from participants after the meeting, and we will share relevant points with the service provider. Your feedback and inputs will help us to continue to steer in the right direction as we plan and move forward with other meetings in the future. As mentioned in the technical guide, to request the floor, please click on Request to Speak blue button on your CUDO page and wait until your request is approved. Once your request is approved, your microphone and camera will be off by default. Please turn them on by clicking first on Mic Off and second Camera Off. With microphone on and camera on now, you have the floor. Once your intervention is over, please click on Release Microphone in order to give the floor to others. We also request that you use the chat function only for technical questions and concerns. Also, given the limited time available today, we ask your support in keeping your interventions to 2 minutes maximum and for asking the floor, if possible, only once per delegation during the entire meeting. It is my pleasure now to introduce you our virtual rostrum composed by the chair of the 6th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, His Excellency Fidelis Magalhaes, Minister of Legislative Reform and Parliamentary Affairs from Timor-Leste, Ms. Armida Salcia Ali Zagbana, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, and Ms. Deki Yangzum, Peer Educator of the Y-Peer Bhutan, representing the civil society from the region. They will be joined by video interventions. Let me now hand over the floor to the chair of the 6th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development to provide his introductory remarks, officially open the forum, and conduct the opening session. Minister Magalhaes, the floor is yours. Hello, we can see and hear you.
Okay, good morning. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Timor-Leste. I would have loved to be talking to you from the rostrum in Bangkok, but the COVID-19 seems to have set a new protocol even for intergovernmental meetings. I'm honored to address you this morning as chair of the 6th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, APFSD, and it has been my honor to represent the forum in regional and international context and in supporting the implementation of the 2030 Agenda in Asia and the Pacific. It is my pleasure to revisit with you some of our major achievements in building, through opportunities offered by the APFSD platform, a concerted regional response to ensure that our region becomes more equal, inclusive, and empowered. At the 6th APFSD, regional voices agreed on the importance of empowerment and inclusion to address inequalities spanning the economic, social, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. On behalf of the 6th APFSD Bureau, I reported the outcomes of the 6th APFSD at the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, HLPF, at a moderated session held on July 16, 2019. Over the past year, the forum contributed to the regional dimension discussions at the HLPF by sharing Asia-Pacific perspectives during the ministerial segment and in a series of side events organized by ESCAP in cooperation with Moreover, 5 sub-regional consultations organized by the ESCAP sub-regional offices in preparation of this 7th APFSD gave the opportunity to member countries to share achievements, challenges faced, and opportunities arising from the 2030 agenda, including for the preparation of the voluntary national reviews, progress of implementation on the 6 entry areas of the Global Sustainable Development Report, and the theme of accelerating action and delivery of the 2030 agenda. Allow me also to warmly thank the Secretariat for the organization of a series of webinars in March and April 2020 that provided additional opportunities to member states and other stakeholders to discuss the theme of the APFSD, given the change of the APFSD towards a virtual modality. I understand that this 7th APFSD will present regional perspectives on the 2030 agenda for sustainable development and reflect on the importance of the regional dimension of follow-up and review for the implementation of the agenda, and represents an opportunity to develop mechanisms for mutual support to achieve the sustainable development goals in Asia and the Pacific. I trust that the present and future sessions of the APFSD will continue to embody the same spirit of collaboration and multi-stakeholder engagement that has become the mark of the past APFSD. I sincerely hope that the APFSD will continue to play an important role by supporting crucial dialogue among member states, sharing experiences and strengthening implementation in order to achieve sustainable development in Asia and the Pacific. I am looking forward to our deliberations today. I thank you, and I would like to officially open the session for today.
Thank you, Minister. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure now to invite Ms. Amida Salcia Alizabana, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, to deliver her welcome address.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 7th Asia-Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development. The theme of this forum is Accelerating Action for and Delivery of the 2030 Agenda in Asia and the Pacific. Our collective efforts to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development now face significant headwinds. The unprecedented severity of the COVID-19 pandemic could slow, if not retard, the progress made to date towards sustainable development. It is therefore very timely to engage with governments and our multi-stakeholders to review our progress and to discuss some of our successful policy responses. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, since the adoption of the 2030 Agenda in 2015, the Asia-Pacific region's progress, based on the latest available data as of 2019, towards attainment of the SDGs has been uneven. Income poverty has continued to fall, with the percentage of people below international poverty line in 2017 at 6.4%. We have witnessed a reduction in the prevalence of undernourishment from 16.4% in 2000 to less than 11% today. Provision of quality education has improved, while the proportion of people with access to basic sanitation has increased from less than half to almost three-fourths, and access to affordable and clean energy has significantly improved since 2000. These are good results to build on. On the other hand, several challenges remain. Inequality is widening within and among countries, and gender equality and women's empowerment still need to be attained in many countries. And the achievements in the social and economic dimensions mask the limited progress made in the environmental ones across the 5 Asia-Pacific sub-regions. The region is experiencing rising marine pollution, which causes irreversible damage to ecosystems, as highlighted in theme study for the 76th Commission session on oceans. Increasing frequency and intensity of natural disasters has affected at least 70 million people last year in the region, and our region is neither sustainably managing its natural resources nor taking adequate action to combat climate change. The overall lack of progress towards the environmental goals is a matter of concern. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the spread of COVID-19 pandemic now risks reversing many of these hard-won development gains and could jeopardize our attainment of the SDGs by end of the decade. According to our latest estimates, most of our economies have already experienced contraction during the first 4 months of 2020. The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic could push millions of people into extreme poverty this year in our region. The widespread imposition of lockdown measures exposed the vulnerability of the informal sector, small and medium enterprises, and migrant workers, who have no recourse to social protection. And lack of universal digital connectivity prevents many children in developing countries from being homeschooled virtually, thereby perpetuating inequality. Over the past few months, however, our environment has shown some early signs of recovery. Carbon dioxide emission and air pollution, especially in our big cities, have been reduced as the decline in industrial production and travel lowered emissions and pollutants. This has given us the needed breathing space. As we work towards recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, we should focus on the preservation of these environmental gains. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, our future policy responses should strongly safeguard the environment, including from climate change, as we pursue economic and social development. Let us consider how we can turn these challenges into opportunities as we implement the 2030 Agenda. I would therefore like to highlight 3 possible entry points developed in consultation with our member states and stakeholders. Strengthening human well-being and capabilities to address the poverty, education, healthcare system, and social protection. Investing in energy, decarbonization, and access to affordable and clean energy, and securing the environmental sustainability as well as climate and disaster resilience. First, let us focus on rebuilding societies that provide equal opportunities, reorienting fiscal policies and stimulus packages to strengthen healthcare and human resources, especially for youth, could reduce income poverty and improve functioning of the labor markets. Leveraging on innovation in the region, technology-based solutions could advance this end. Second, we must shift ways we source, consume, and distribute energy as our economies recover. Our low-carbon future depends on deployment of smart technologies, developments in the renewable energy and electricity sectors, as well as investment in green public transport systems and smart urban planning initiatives. Third, resilience to recover not only natural disasters, but also climate change is essential. Policy measures should take climate mitigation and adaptation, as well as disaster resilience into consideration. Risk analytics for real-time hotspot mapping and monitoring, as well as early warning systems, are critical steps toward preparedness. Going forward, governments will need both the strategic as well as institutional framework to make recovery from external shocks as swift as possible. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, multi-stakeholder partnerships as well as collaboration with the United Nations Development System at regional, sub-regional, and national levels are essential for building back better. fast-tracking the Sustainable Development Goals, driving Asia-Pacific transformations, which will be launched later today with Bambang Susantono, Vice President of the Asian Development Bank, and Valerie Cliff, Deputy Regional Director for Asia Pacific and Director of the Bangkok Regional Hub of UNDP, is a regional initiative to provide policy support to our member states. The report highlights ways to mobilize people, align systems, promote innovation in institutions, and integrate resilience into policy making. As in the previous years, we will convey your policy priorities and key messages from this forum to the 2020 High-Level Political Forum. I look forward to listening to your views on the future course of action towards attainment of our Sustainable Development Goals and count on your full commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam, for your warm and welcoming remarks. We will now hear from Ms. Amida Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, through a pre-recorded message, and I'm kindly asking the Secretariat to please project the video recording.
Excellencies, friends and colleagues, it's a pleasure to join you for the 7th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. I want to convey my thanks to the Executive Secretary, my sister, Armida Ajisabana, for bringing us together in this alternative format. Today's meeting takes place in truly unprecedented times. The COVID-19 pandemic is taking hundreds of thousands of lives. It is causing massive human suffering and a huge social and economic disruption. And it poses a particular risk to the world's most vulnerable countries and people. In the face of such a crisis, we are reminded of our common humanity, our interdependence, and the critical importance of effective international cooperation. We are reminded also of the urgent need to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals through the decade of action that we are embarking on this year. As you prepare for your deliberations today, allow me to highlight 3 key points. First, the state of play. We are now in the 5th year of the SDGs, and it is fair to say that we are a long way from where we need to be. Even before COVID-19, at a global level, we were not on track to end poverty, provide opportunity for all, and achieve gender equality, or win the race against climate change. As the 2020 ESCAP SDG Progress Report demonstrates, this is also the case for countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Its headline finding is deeply concerning. Without a significant change in course, the region could miss the SDGs by 2030 and could see worse outcomes on 20% of its targets in 2030 than in 2015, especially on the environmental side. At a global level, it is such implementation gaps on health, education, social protection, and environmental sustainability that have left our world so vulnerable to the COVID-19 crisis. In 2020 alone, up to 50 million more people are projected to fall into extreme poverty, disruption to food systems, and reduced access to healthcare and education and vaccination programs that will have a profound effect on the world's most vulnerable people. All the while, major threats to our health and survival, such as climate change and biodiversity loss, remain as grave as ever. I would like to commend the governments of the Asia-Pacific region for their effective response to the ongoing health emergency. This has helped to save lives, and it can inspire other governments that have not yet been hit by the virus. At the same time, the Asia-Pacific region is projected to suffer significant socioeconomic impacts, all of which will make our journey to success by 2030 all the more challenging. This is where we stand today, Excellencies. The second point I would like to highlight relates to the way forward. We have reached a point of great risk and opportunity for our world. If we are to tackle the fragilities this crisis has exposed, then our recovery must break with the past. It must pursue equality, inclusion, sustainability, and transformation. In short, it must bring the fundamental calling of the 2030 Agenda to life. That means protecting the development gains of the past 2 decades, putting resilience and sustainability at the core of investment and recovery packages, and reorienting our economic models to generate green jobs and reduce pressure on our natural environment. It means tackling debt issues and creating the fiscal space needed to invest in chronically underfunded public services such as social protection and healthcare. Using the momentum of the response to enable digital connectivity for all and reimagine education, and pursuing change in every sphere to overcome the single greatest obstacle to inclusiveness in our world today, gender equality. These issues are at the core of the UN's package for the immediate socioeconomic response that will guide us, the support provided by 131 country teams serving 162 countries and territories over the coming 12 to 18 months. Excellencies, the third point I wish to make relates to international and regional cooperation. COVID-19 is a reminder that so many of the challenges people and governments face today are cross-border in nature that require global and regional solutions. Yet our current models and levels of international cooperation are simply not up to the task. As we mark the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and work to recover better, we must revive international cooperation. For our part, the UN Development System has been working to transform itself, to be more effective, efficient, and agile, to be better able to respond to country needs and priorities. We are well advanced in a review of the UN's regional architecture that will culminate in much greater coordination, impact, and clarity on the UN's value in each region. Similarly, we have worked this past year to sharpen our proposals for strengthening our offer to small island developing states serviced by the UN's multi-country offices. The UN's Economic and Social Council will be considering our proposals in the coming weeks, and we hope to start transitioning to a new UN regional architecture in the second semester. Stepping up our response in the region is an absolute necessity to overcome COVID-19 and remain firmly on track for 2030. On the ground, our United Nations resident coordinators are driving practical solutions to leverage the assets of all UN entities in the COVID-19 response, optimizing resources and expanding the fiscal space to respond. And our regional colleagues are providing us with analysis of impacts in the region and working together to support cross-border dimensions. Excellencies, colleagues, in times like these, it may seem that we've lost our way, but we have the 2030 Agenda as our North Star, our compass. It remains an agenda of immense wisdom and foresight for whose time has surely come. You can count on the United Nations to support you as we exit this crisis and work to recover better during this decade of action. I thank you.
Sincere thanks to Ms. Amina Mohammed for her remarks. I am pleased now to introduce a video message from His Excellency Mr. Don Pramudiwane, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Thailand.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, Executive Secretary Alice Jabana, distinguished delegates, on behalf of the Royal Thai Government, it is an honor for me to address member states and participants of the 7th session of the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, or APFSD. Thailand commends the efforts of the Executive Secretary and the SCAP team in organizing the virtual consultations and the 7th APFSD within the current restrictions. This year's APFSD is of particular importance as we embark upon the final decade of action on the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 is a direct and pressing challenge to most of the SDGs. is more than just a global public health emergency. It's an unprecedented challenge facing humanity and human security. And it will require cooperation from all countries, sector, and stakeholders at every level. Everyone has a part to play. COVID-19 is a direct threat to both human health and health systems. We could perhaps have responded more effectively to this crisis had we invested more in our health systems. Among other things, this means ensuring access to health care for all, including the most vulnerable and marginalized, universal health care coverage, including financial risk protection, access to quality healthcare services, and safe, effective, and affordable essential medicines and vaccine for all can play a vital role here. But COVID-19 also exposes our economic and social weaknesses. We have seen a rise in inequalities, from impacts on employment, pay, and social protection to access to healthcare and other basic services. We must ensure that in this fight, we leave no one behind. Thailand is convinced that the post-COVID world will emerge through drastic transformative change. To overcome this crisis, we have to use this as the impetus to build back better to realize the SDGs by 2030. This means a change in mindset and ways of working to prioritize human-centered pathways to achieve the SDGs. I wish to elaborate on 3 ways we can harness this informative change. Firstly, COVID-19 has highlighted the need to shift to a more sustainable development path for our own well-being and our environment. There's no one-size-fits-all model, but innovative homegrown development thinking and approaches can help to smooth this transition to more sustainable paths. Thailand's Sufficiency Economic Philosophy, or SEP, emphasizing moderation, reasonableness, and resilience to external shocks, is of great relevance at this difficult time. The SEP provides guidelines for inclusive, balanced, and sustainable development in all areas. It also focuses on people. Hence, those vulnerable will be a priority in Thailand's way forward. We believe that it can also offer solutions for some of our friends. Secondly, science, technology, and innovation, or STI in short, are vital in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. STI and the new normal of social distancing will accelerate digitalization as the key to bring about global progress on the SDGs. This needs to happen in tandem with the effective sharing and transfer of knowledge and technology through such frameworks as South-South and trilateral cooperation. Research and development on vaccine and digital diagnostic to fight COVID-19 will be crucial. We must also strive to promote innovative solutions to the most challenging phase of development challenges. STIs is also key to enhanced food security, which is vital during this time of crisis. Guided by sufficiency economy philosophy, Thailand aims to accomplish all 4 dimensions of food security, namely food availability, food accessibility, food utilization, and food stability, as well as to reduce food waste in the supply chain. We will also share that we have with others, especially those most in need. Promoting STI is also a crucial means of addressing the complex issues related to the environment. Therefore, the time is now right for SCAP member states to consider a digital revolution, including by enhancing scientific collaboration in our region through science diplomacy. However, bringing about this digital revolution also required us to bridge the digital divide. Over half of the world's population still lacks the digital tools to transform their lives. Any effort to utilize STI to accelerate implementation of SDGs must therefore also be coupled with outreach efforts to bridge digital gaps. Accelerating SDGs implementation through technology must begin by giving ordinary people the tools to do so. Thirdly, it is more important now than ever that we mobilized everyone, everywhere in our endeavor to build back better and accelerate implementation of the SDGs. Volunteerism is a powerful force and therefore should be one way forward. It helps to expand and mobilize stakeholders' engagement, connect national initiatives with action at the local level, as well as enables and empowers people to participate in their own development. Volunteerism includes all groups: youth, older persons, women, migrants, or persons with disabilities. As a case in point, Thailand's COVID-19 response has been supported by more than 1 million village health volunteers nationwide and an additional 15,000 public health volunteers in Bangkok. They have been working on the front line, often at great risk to themselves, by helping to disseminate knowledge and conducting house-to-house visits to monitor the health of community residents, including migrants. This is just but one example of transformative potential of volunteerism. Meanwhile, as women constitute half of the world's population, we need to empower women and girls while ensuring that they are not subject to discrimination and violence in any circumstances. Women would thus be assured that their place as a key stakeholder and transformative force in SDGs implementation. As we gradually move to reopen communities and rebuild our economies, we have a great opportunity to turn this crisis into an opportunity to come together and renew our common resolve to accelerate actions to achieve the 2030 development agenda. This direction is already clear, that we need to move towards becoming more sustainable socially, environmentally, and economically. And with sustainability comes resilience, which is needed to protect us against future shocks and crises. So let us pursue partnership at all levels to ensure our effective recovery from COVID-19. COVID does not discriminate against anyone, and we all are affected. Let us share experiences in containing the outbreak, addressing socioeconomic impacts, and reviving our countries. The countries of Asia Pacific have much to contribute to and to learn from one another. We are in this together, and in a new, sustainable, and compassionate, prosperous, and resilient world requires our common efforts. Starting from today, we will build back better together. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for your remarks. Our next speaker is invited to represent the voice of stakeholders. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Deki Yamzon, peer educator, White Peer, Bhutan, to deliver her remarks.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, fellow civil society members, good morning. I hope everyone is doing fine. I am Deki Yamzon from Bhutan, 21 years old and a part of network of youth peer educators, YPeer. Currently, COVID-19 has killed many, caused economic drift, and created a platform for discrimination on the basis of gender, age, race, working and conditions, their displacement, and digital divide. People who need to escape from their not safe homes are restricted to enter other countries as refugees. The sources of income are shut down. Hunger, poverty, and food security issues are likely to be doubled. People with disabilities have become more infected in terms of assessing skills and responsibilities. youths of all kinds are affected due to the disruption of their education. The employment rate has further increased. Although we cannot put a stop to the pandemic for now, we do not want our government and the global organizations to give up on us or ignore our voices. Therefore, we, the civil societies, call for a living environment with no inequalities during and after this pandemic. I'd like to share the following recommendation from the youth consultations on the APFSD 2020. First, approach youth initiatives, participation and engagement as an essential principle of 2030 agenda in the Asia Pacific. Second, strengthen youth agency by supporting capacity development for young people, youth organizations, network and movement, enhancing mutual responsibility, trust and collaboration in the implementation of the SDGs. Third, promote gender equality and empowerment among girls and young women as a priority. Fourth, establish necessary channels to ensure youth participation in the SDGs action. Governments and stakeholders need to cooperate with and support existing initiatives and networks at grassroots levels and national levels that contribute on the development of the 2030 agenda, making sure they are leaving no one behind. We also echo the voices of other constituencies. We need to recognize and address the systematic barriers that impede the enforcement and acceleration of transformation in the SDGs. While some governments have been more welcoming, we also see more militarism, greater environmental degradation, ever-widening inequality, and greater vulnerabilities of people. There is no development if there is no justice. Lastly, we urge the government and the UN that in the context of COVID-19 and the global economic depression, and all the more, civil society should be a part of the policy decision on changing the courses of Agenda 2030 to build upon our development justice approach. We want our voices to be heard because we are not only the future, we are the now.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yang Zong. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, now let's move on to agenda item 1, election of the Bureau and adoption of the agenda. Now, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, continuing with our agenda, we now move to the election of officers of the Bureau. In view of the outbreak of COVID-19 and the special circumstances of this year's APFSD, I propose that the Bureau comprises of a single chair and vice chair. May I now open the floor for any nominations for the positions of the chair and vice chair. I recognize the distinguished delegate from Fiji.
Mr. Chair, my delegation has the honor of proposing the following delegates to serve on the Bureau of the 7th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. As Chair, Her Excellency Ms. Samantha K. Jayasuriya, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary and Permanent Representative of Sri Lanka to ASCAP. As Vice Chair, Her Excellency Ms. Rosemary Edilan, Under-Secretary for the Policy and Planning Group, NEDA, Philippines. My delegation is confident that distinguished delegates who have been nominated will discharge their duties efficiently and effectively for the successful deliberations of the forum. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The distinguished delegate of Fiji has nominated Her Excellency Ms. Samantha K. Jayasuriya Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary and Permanent Representative of Sri Lanka to ESCAP as Chair of the 7th APFSD, and Ms. Rosemary Edion, Undersecretary for the Policy and Planning Group, National Economic and Development Authority, Philippines, as Vice Chair. Would any delegation wish to second the nomination? I recognize the distinguished delegate from Indonesia.
No, please speak.
I recognize the distinguished delegate from Indonesia.
Yes.
Ambassador, we would need you now to second the nomination now.
Mr. Chair, my delegation has the honor in seconding the nominations which have just been proposed by distinguished delegates of Fiji for the various bureaus position for the 7th Asia Pacific Forum on the Sustainable Development. My delegation has full confidence in the proposed bureau in discharging their duties for a successful deliberation. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished delegates of Indonesia. I thus have the pleasure to formally announce that the Bureau of the 7th session of the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development is composed of the following. As Chair, Her Excellency Ms. Samantha K. Jayasuriya, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary and Permanent Representative of Sri Lanka to ESCAP. As Vice Chair, Ms. Rosemary Edion, Undersecretary for the Policy and Planning Group, National Economic and Development Authority, Philippines. I congratulate the Bureau, I congratulate the officers of the Bureau for this election. Now it is my honor to invite Her Excellency Ms. Samantha K. Jayasuriya to conduct this meeting in representation of the Bureau of this meeting from this point forward. I thank you all. Thank you very much. And please, Your Excellency.
Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed an honor and privilege for me to serve as chair of this important forum. For myself and on behalf of the Vice Chair-elect of the Bureau, I wish to express our appreciation to the distinguished representatives for the confidence you have placed in us. The COVID-19 outbreak has challenged all of us to do business differently, as evident from this year's organization of the forum. We have a compact agenda ahead of us. I am confident that together with member states and the spirit of cooperation and engagement of all distinguished delegates, I, as chair of this 7th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, will be able to ensure that the meeting produces meaningful outcomes. I wish to thank the Secretariat for its organization of the forum, and I am sure we can count on its continued good work. I would like to express particular appreciation to Ms. Al-Shabana, Ms. Amina J. Mohammed, His Excellency Mr. Don Pramudwinai, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Thailand, and our speaker representing the voice of stakeholder groups for their thoughtful messages during the opening session. Last but not least, on behalf of the Bureau and all member states, it is my distinct honor to thank and appreciate the excellent stewardship given by Honorable Minister for Legislative Reforms and Parliamentary Affairs of Timor-Leste, His Excellency Fidelis Magalhaes, the Chair of the 6th APFSD for over the period of past 1 year. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let us now take up agenda item 1C, the adoption of the agenda, as presented to you in document escap/RFSD/2020/L.1/Rev2. The Secretariat would like to inform you that documents escap/RFSD/2020/1, 2, 3, and 4 are not changed to reflect the revised annotated agenda escap/RFSD/2020/L.1/Rev2. Are there any comments on the document? If there are no comments, the agenda as contained in document escap/RFSD/2020/L.1/Rev2 is adopted. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your cooperation in adopting the agenda of the 7th APFSD. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will now address agenda item 2, Regional Perspectives on Progress on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Documents pertinent to this agenda items are acceleration along transformative paths to deliver sustainable development, reflected in escap/RFSD/2020/1. 5 years on, where do we stand? Given in escap/RFSD/2020/2. Updates on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the sub-regional level in document escap/RFSD/2020/INF/1, and opportunities and entry points for transformative change in Asia and the Pacific, escap/RFSD/2020/INF/20. Let me first invite the Secretary to the forum to deliver some housekeeping announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to remind the distinguished delegates that to intervene, please click on Request to Speak blue button on your Kudo. But before you do that, please wait for the Chair to open the floor. This is why you will be seeing that some requests that they are submitted at this point are rejected. So once the Chair will be open the floor, you could press the Request to Speak blue button, and once your request is approved, your microphone and camera will be off, and then you will need to turn them on by clicking on mic off and camera off. Again, we request that the chat function is used only for technical questions and concerns, and also given the limited time available today, we ask your support in keeping your intervention to 2 minutes, and for asking the floor, if possible, only once per delegation, and once the Chair will be opening the floor. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to assume the responsibilities of moderating under agenda item 2 of this session on accelerating action and delivery of the 2030 Agenda in Asia and the Pacific. I'm confident that discussions in this session will provide a space to share perspectives on transformational actions and key considerations for governments as they shape actions to fast-track transformation for the SDGs. This session is structured as follows. We will start with a short presentation by the Secretariat introducing the theme of this session, followed by a talk on trends to watch in the region. We will then hear from a couple of discussants involved in the production of the theme report for the APFSD. Thereafter, I will open the floor for interventions. Participants are requested to hold off requesting the floor till then. To start this first session, I would like to welcome Mr. Kavi Saeed, Deputy Executive Secretary of UNESCAP.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and good morning to everybody. We would like to start this agenda item on regional review by sharing a little bit our understanding of how far our region has come in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, even before the likely setbacks from COVID-19, and then move on to identify areas for acceleration and entry points for transformation. As many of you know, each year the Asia-Pacific SDG Progress Report, supported by the SDG Data Gateway, provides us with a comprehensive picture of progress in our region and its sub-regions. So what does this year's progress assessment reveal to us? Firstly, it reveals that a snapshot of where the region is today, and it shows a mixed picture. Possibly what the Deputy Secretary General said, it shows that we are a long way from where we need to be. The region has made progress on some SDGs, such as on poverty reduction and on achieving quality education, as our Executive Secretary said at the opening. But there has been little progress on industry, innovation and infrastructure, which is Goal 9, on sustainable cities, which is Goal 11, on life below water, which is Goal 14, as well as on reducing inequalities, Goal 10, something that is being exposed very much by the impact of COVID-19. And maybe more worryingly still, the region has actually regressed on some goals, including promoting responsible consumption and production, Goal 12, and on climate action, Goal 13. Our assessment also shows where the region could be heading by 2030. The green areas in the graphic tell us that if we remain and maintain our current trajectories, less and less people, for example, will be living in extreme poverty. But the yellow and red areas remind us that for many goals and targets, promoting a healthy environment and inclusive development, our region is simply not on track. And the prevalence of grey areas shows that insufficient data remains a major challenge. More investment is needed to close the data gaps and strengthen the use of data for policy making. So there is a clear urgency to accelerate progress, and this is what underlies and underlines the decade of action for sustainable development, along with 6 potential transformative entry points. Together with our partners at the Asian Development Bank and the UN Development Programme, we have examined where more efforts are needed, where there is momentum already for change, and what strategies can help accelerate the pace of change. And this, to some degree, is a preview of a report that will be launched a little bit later today at 12:30. When we apply the same progress assessment methodology as we've used to show SDG progress, it becomes clear that the region is also behind as we look through the lens of the 6 transformative areas that are shown on the slide. The region is farthest behind in promoting and putting in place sustainable and just economies, and in securing global environmental commons. And these are 2 areas that have also emerged as a key to building back better from COVID-19. Our analysis also looks at how quickly countries are advancing across the 6 entry points that have been identified. We do this by comparing a country's most recent annual rate of progress for a given indicator between 2010 and 2018 with other countries at the same level of achievement. Countries are clustered into 4 quadrants, as you can see from the graphic. The top 2 quadrants include those with faster than average progress, and the lower 2 are those with slower than average progress. The key takeaway from our analysis is that higher income is not a cure-all solution. No country in the region is moving fast in all 6 transformative areas, regardless of income levels. In fact, some lower income and lower middle income countries have emerged as sprinters in several areas. And so did countries with special needs. For example, a number of small island developing states are at the very forefront of reducing emissions. The analysis also shows that sustainable urban and peri-urban development is a last-mile challenge for a significant number of countries. Important because our region became majority urban last year in 2019. We also found synergies across the 6 transformative areas. For example, a country's progress on human well-being and capabilities is strongly correlated with almost all other entry points. And finally, possibly most importantly, we did not find significant trade-offs among the 6 areas. This meant that, for example, protecting environmental commons is not necessarily competing with other goals, such as sustainable food systems or healthy nutrition. These findings have allowed us to identify 4 key elements that seem to be common for accelerating transformation. And they are also of great relevance as we look to build back better in the post-COVID world. First is setting a clear direction coupled with stronger collaboration between governments and other stakeholders. Second, transformation will simply not happen without structural changes, such as removing the barriers to basic healthcare and social protection. For example, raising the level of social protection investments in our region to global averages could prevent vulnerable populations from sliding back into poverty after shocks, whether these are climate-related disasters or pandemics like COVID-19. Third, we need to sustain the momentum of change among our people and institutions, such as scaling up the emerging local ICT innovations in inclusive and distant learning, including during the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, accelerating SDG progress is a complex task, especially in the aftermath of COVID. Balancing the immediate and long-term needs, balancing common needs with individual needs, and so on, brings a level of complexity. And so adopting system thinking and systematic thinking will be helpful to tackle this complexity and policy trade-offs. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, even before COVID-19, our region needed acceleration across the board to successfully reach the goals by 2030. But the current pandemic does not mean suspending the implementation or the acceleration of the SDGs. Quite the opposite. Only accelerated implementation can help to address the vulnerabilities and the inequalities that have been exposed by the current pandemic. But countries in our region, as our analysis shows, have shown how momentum can be built around the SDGs and the transformations needed. And these experiences will be an important part of ensuring the region builds back better from the pandemic. You can find much more analysis of what has just been presented to you in our 2 reports on the SDG Asia-Pacific Partnership webpage and on the SDG Data Gateway. Madam Chair, Excellency, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sahid, for this very clear overview of accelerating action and delivery of 2030 in our region and where we are. Now I have the pleasure to invite Professor Sohail Inayatullah, inaugural UNESCO Chair in Futures Studies. Professor Tamakang University, Associate at Melbourne Business School, the University of Melbourne, and instructor at metafutureschool.org. Professor Sohail Inayatullah is uniquely qualified to address the topic of transformation. He is the first UNESCO Chair in Futures Studies. He is a political scientist and futurist. and has been awarded the L'Oreal Award for All-Time Best Futurist by the Shaping Tomorrow Foresight Network. Professor Inayatullah, various trends have converged to define the way in which crisis has impacted people, the society, and the economy. What do you think are the systemic transformation needed for an inclusive, green, and sustainable future? And what are a few examples of actions taken by governments in the region? Also, if I may ask, what are the key trends to watch as governments look to the future and shape their policy responses? Where are the evolving opportunities and threats? You have the floor, Professor.
Thanks so much. Just making sure you can hear me, and if we want, we can. I'm very happy to be here, Madam Chair. Thanks for the fantastic presentation, Zahedi. So if you see the report, and I'll talk more about that later, but it's very much we're on a road, and the road is surprise-free. So I want to talk a bit about what do we do if the road changes, what direction, how could the future change? So let me, if you have the, I think there's a slideshow there, if you can put it on. If you can't, that's okay. I know the organizers have something there. If you can put on the first slide. No, okay, that's okay. It's not needed. So just try to, when we start to think about the future of Asia, we have an Asia Pacific Futures Forum. And that Futures Network, we try to look at, get futures together to think about Asia 2030, Asia 2050. And this is the more, while you folks are doing the tough, here's what we need to do today, we're always thinking about what's next, what's helping us transform, what could make us more likely to get to where we wish to go. So the first thing, I think this has come out earlier, we have a book called Asia 2038, and what jumped out in that book was very clear, gender equity. So if Asia is to transform by 2035, gender equity is first. It's the road, it's the way, it's everything. The second main thing that you need to watch out for, in which ways can artificial intelligence and machine learning enable everything? It works because it's cheaper, more accessible, it's smoother. Of course, it's maybe less secure. We know organized crime is thrilled that AI is everywhere because they can use it. The third thing that has come across very strongly in every foresight workshop, and I'll talk a bit more about that, throughout Asia, is education as rote learning, education as the long lecture, education as the person knows best, to education very much in the Singapore program, the report says teach less, learn more. So many ways of learning, not necessarily being the smartest person in the room, but helping everyone learn. So this is facilitation and enabling, and Asia is now starting to move from that as the lecture to enabling. The other point that's not in the PowerPoint is that basically we still have a traditional structure which is highly, what I would say, vertical. It's looking always to the leader. We need direction, but it's leadership with the commons. So we say that the challenge to the Asia big man fetish, if you will. So this is something you need to watch out for. Are we becoming more commons? Are we seeing education transform? Is AI increasing? Are women, in fact, more powerful in boards, not just at the Prime Minister's office, but everywhere? So this leads to the situation, of course, many of us who work in public health, we've been talking about the pandemic for 20 years, and we can see those countries who are ready, as Taiwan were, they responded quickly because they already had the possibility this could occur. So this is using climate change and future pandemics as a way to develop foresight capacity. So this is both to forecast what's next, but using the future to change today. Many meetings get stuck because people are arguing all the time about today, but the future becomes a way to resolve conflicts. Which direction do we wish to go in? And thus the SDG goals work so well. It's clear, here's where we wish to go. And the 6 areas in the report are fantastic as well. Now, so this then moves to the long term. As you develop the foresight capacity, where do you want to go? We know where we don't want to go, which is depression, fracturing of nations, what's called a long malaise if COVID-19 is truly disruptive. So I'm not sure which slide is showing, but there should be a slide of those 6 points there. So this leads to really the long-term view. This would be a slide called Trends to Watch For. The long-term view is very clear This is the establishment of an Asian Confederation by 2050. Now, you may think that's too idealistic, but we're always looking for signs of more integration, not less integration. So can we have a regional governance structure different from EU, but still thinking through about transformation? So this is in terms of the trends we need to watch out for. Now, when you're going on this road, this race, the last mile sprinters, pasteurizers, are there some foundational disruptions that could change the nature of the road, that change the game? So that's the next slide. It should be called 7 disruptions. So let me just discuss some of those. Those may seem strange to you, but in our work in foresight, we're always trying to think what's 5, 10, 15 years ahead, and how do we in the Asia Pacific region not purchase the EU's future from other countries? Meaning we're behind, always catching up, they're always getting ahead. So this is playing the disruption game. The first obvious disruption is in agriculture. As we shift to cellular agriculture, the vegan movement, traditional milk to the new milk, this is looking for traditional meat to the new meat. Should Asia lead in that? What should be the investment in the new agriculture, cellular agriculture? The second major disruption is imagining Asia by 2030, a solar system on every rooftop or in every village or in every home or in every building by 2030. So you develop a commons where we're sharing energy. Bangladesh is already leading in that. So this means it's a distributed network, but it's also an integrated ecological network. It's shared. Now the third one, which I mentioned earlier, is of course gender equity, but this is the research we're getting. Women, we know from now empirical research, are better at intelligence gathering in terms of counterterrorism. They're also seeing they're better at financial management. And now we're seeing COVID-19 a really clear difference between male leaders and female leaders. So gender equity is not just a nice idea to be more inclusive, it actually enhances effectiveness and productivity. Now, I ran a workshop yesterday for the school system. The thing that came out there, and it's come out in our course in Bangkok, in Manila, in KL, in Phnom Penh, is very much let's get flexible. People don't want to work in offices. We need some time at school, but people want real flexibility where students can learn from all over the world. They end the factory. They more go from factory to a flexible learning system. So that becomes crucial here. The next thing we need to start to think about again, how do we get rid of the factory? In a workshop in Manila, people said, well, we actually need to take a wrecking ball to the factory. We have to put the student at the center, not the castle at the center. So when people are exploring new narratives like the eco playground, the circus, the public park. So we know after COVID-19, there's many things we won't want to do. Schooling is one of them. We want learning, but the factory model of schooling, people are saying that doesn't work so well. How do you integrate face-to-face with AI, hybrid with virtual? So this goes even deeper now. How do you transform agriculture system and the learning systems? This we would call, one group called it the Tinder of education, what's called platform cooperatives. In a world with this increasing size, a size towards Amazon, towards Alphabet, how do we create distribution? So this is going from a labor model of value to a distribution model of value. So the goal becomes for large organizations like the Asia Pacific Forum, Asia Pacific Futures Network, is to actually create platforms which matches suppliers with those who have skills, those who need content. So this is one way to transform the university to really what you might call it jokingly the Tinder of education, and basically platform co-ops are ways where we move forward. So that creates a different type of structure with far more equity, because that's what we're seeing in COVID-19 is getting worse. Now, the part I didn't put there, of course, is how do you measure all this? So if you think through, if you see this transformation, you need to have a different measurement system. So this is very much the measurement system is around quadruple bottom line. We're measuring prosperity, we're measuring people, we're measuring planet, and we're measuring purpose. We need to have that as well. So this, if you say, here's the trends we need to watch for, and then here are the disruptions. Now, if we go to the next slide, what are some of the things we've learned on the ground? Thankfully, the ADB is leading the way, thinking how they can innovate. They have a great futures program. The Vice President will be speaking today. Suzanne Roth is leading it. And so we've set up these foresight workshops with offices of the Prime Minister, with probably central leader saying, what's next? How can ADB help in actually funding the future, not funding the past? Not infrastructure, but knowledge economies. So having now run about 7 of these and others in Timor-Leste, Cambodia, Mongolia, Pakistan, Malaysia, Singapore, what are some of our insights? So again, these touch upon what we spoke earlier. You should have a slide with 2 charts and 2 pictures. The first thing we learned is everyone wants clean, green, smart cities using renewable energy. AI plus solar plus peer-to-peer. In Armenia, the governor said roads that create energy. So everyone says we must now have a foundational energy shift. This prevents the issue much deeper than COVID-19, which is climate change. The second thing, again, I mentioned earlier, education must transform. Whether it's platforms or something else, the old Asian model was education for a job. This is education for life and learning. When we worked in the Ministry of Finance and the PRC, they said the metaphor shifts to the dragon bounded by the Great Wall to the dragon unleashed toward global education. So as you start to think about the future, you move towards futures literacy. So in Kazakhstan, the Prime Minister suggested futures literacy becomes a key competitive advantage because you understand here's the way we're going, here's how it might change, here's what we can do differently in this time of change. So you have Singapore, which has a future center, Malaysia has one, Brunei has one, Thailand has one, Iran has one. There's different groups saying futures literacy is crucial. As we slow down in COVID-19, we can start to think about were we caught unprepared? If we were, then foresight is a crucial aspect for the PM's office, for every community group and every high school. Now the slide up there was very clear. There were 2 parts there. We see the gender part in Cambodia. Garment worker means a woman. By 2030, we want a leader means a woman. When it comes to the e-transformation governance, they said we need to go from technology that's complicated to technology that's simple. Paperless, the cloud, for the greater good of the nation. And the metaphor they used was powerful. The traditional system is called the monk. The new system, they said, is the e-Buddha, a wise system. It makes life easier for everyone. So the main point I want to conclude on, we're on a road, there's a direction, and we're aware of this. But we're asking ourselves, let's be prepared, what's changing? So foresight, what are the signals for change while we're driving? Education, nature, equity, cooperatives, but also, is the car itself changing? Should the car be driven by solar energy? And finally, is the road changing? Is it getting greener? Is it creating energy? And most critically, who is driving the car? Can we have driverless cars? Can we have genderless cars? So this is really the agenda for let's keep on getting better. Let's deal with uncertainty and let's be ready for transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Inayatullah, for your fascinating insights. I understand that our next session will discuss some of the topics you touched upon in more details. Distinguished delegates, before moving on to our 2 discussants, purely on the interest of managing this session within the limited time in an inclusive and transparent manner, I would now like to invite all government delegations wishing to request the floor to comment or to put a question to register now by requesting the floor using the request to speak button. Kindly be reminded when you are given the floor to intervene, make it for no longer than 2 minutes. So we will be able to allow as many participants as possible to engage in this session. After the 2 discussants speak, I will invite all major stakeholders and the international organizations wishing to speak to request the floor by using the request to speak button. So please hold until then. Now, moving on, I would like to invite our first discussant, Mr. Bambang Susanto, Vice President for Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development, Asian Development Bank, to speak on the theme report of the APFSD. You have the floor. Mr. Susantano, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you,
Please.
Madam Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad that we have been able to convince the important forum highlighted our region's vulnerability to shocks and stresses. Failures related to SDG 3 on health and well-being, with targets to manage communicable diseases and strengthen health system, have had sweeping implications for all 17 goals. It is a devastating reminder of why we need the SDGs to provide a holistic and ambitious framework for all countries and the cost of neglecting parts of the 2030 agenda. As we cope with the immediate term effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, we must not lose sight of the medium-term need for transformations to achieve the SDGs. ADB has developed a 20 billion COVID-19 support package. Initial efforts have focused on healthcare needs, food security, and fiscal space constraint, with a focus on the needs of the poorest and most vulnerable. In the medium term, we will be supporting countries to recover from the crisis and look to the future. As Dr. Inayatullah's presentation reinforced, there are many possible futures. Our 2020 SCAP ADB UNDP report considers 6 transformative entry points for accelerating the 2030 agenda. These include investing in human capabilities and well-being, as well as building sustainable economies, food system, and nutrition. All have renewed relevance as we respond to the crisis. Tools are needed to support this complex policy making, and this is where futures and foresight thinking will be most useful. ADB has been supporting its member countries to make use of such tools in development planning, and just last month, we published a unique handbook for policymakers entitled Future Thinkings in Asia and the Pacific. The publications can be downloaded from our website, adb.org. To innovate in how we work and make more use of available digital technologies, all the while maintaining our focus on delivering development results. We will need to harness this momentum and make it part of our new normal. Resilience must be central to our strategies and interventions. Such shocks do not respect borders, so the pathway to saving lives and securing livelihood lies not in national isolation, but in cooperating across borders on information sharing, capacity building, and policy coordinations. We must use the SDG and Paris Agreement as the guiding frameworks for our long-term recovery efforts and do what it takes to prioritize their attainment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Susantano. Now let us hear from Ms. Valerie Cliff, UNDP Deputy Assistant Administrator, Deputy Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific, and Director for the Bangkok Regional Office. Ms. Cliff, you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Asia-Pacific region has seen rapid economic growth and unprecedented success in reducing extreme poverty. Despite the progress, the region is trailing behind on the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And as the Deputy Executive Secretary of SCAP showed us at the beginning of this session, the progress on the SDGs is, of course, further stalled this year in 2020 with the truly devastating socioeconomic impact of COVID-19. The crisis is a test of how much the region can manage risks and sustain human progress. Building on our worldwide experience, thought leadership, and over 50 years of experience in including in health crises, UNDP's programmatic and policy offers leverage our strengths to deliver the SDGs in a fast and lasting results. Consistent with the principles of the UN Secretary General's global call and 5-pillar approach of the UN Development System Socioeconomic Response Framework, UNDP has been providing services to countries through its program framework, anchored in a 3-pronged approach in responding across the pre-surge, surge, and recovery phases, with a focus on vulnerable populations and those left behind. And that was very inspiring this morning. His Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Thailand, who talked about the mass mobilization of volunteers at the village level, including at the village level, indeed, to try to make sure that no one is left behind. UNDP is moving towards the next generation of solutions and supporting governments for addressing those complex challenges. Our country offices, our innovation center, and 60 country accelerator labs have been employing this systems thinking and anticipatory and futurist trends that Professor Sohail so well outlined, an approach for understanding the complexity of the wicked socioeconomic, environmental issues, and now the COVID-19 crisis. A number of examples of our programs accelerating the SDG progress can be found in the 2020 SDG Progress Regional Report prepared through the partnership of SCAP, ADB, and UNDP, which we're very proud to be a part of, and I know that will be launched later this afternoon. I would like to conclude by saying that the COVID-19 pandemic is a defining moment for modern society. Managing the pandemic and building forward better calls for accelerating the SDGs through enhanced global and regional solidarity in addition to country actions. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cliff. Thank you once again for all the speakers for this session. We heard about several promising strategies to fast-track transformation for the SDGs. I will now open the floor and start with questions to the speakers, followed by comments. I believe that the representatives of the member states have registered by now. And now I invite also the major groups and other stakeholders. The international organizations may also, who wants to express their comments, to register and take the floor using request to speak button. And to all distinguished participants, I kindly remind that to limit the interventions to no longer than 2 minutes in length, so that we can allow more participants to speak at this session. To begin the discussion, I will now invite the Honorable Minister from Turkmenistan. Honorable Sir, you have the floor. Can you hear us? Secretariat, can you check whether the Honorable Minister is connected? Honorable Minister from Turkmenistan, you have the floor, sir.
Sir, we cannot hear you. Honorable Minister, we can see your video, but we cannot hear you.
In the interest of time, we will proceed with the next speaker and then come back to the Honorable Minister from Turkmenistan. Secretariat, please ensure that we get connection at that time. I have the honor to give the floor to the distinguished delegation from Bangladesh, to be followed by the distinguished delegation of China. Bangladesh, you have the floor. Can I move to China? Bangladesh, are you connected with us? May I, in that event, invite the distinguished delegation of China? You have 2 minutes to intervene. Distinguished delegation from China.
尊敬的主席女士，各位代表，感谢秘书处和各位专家的报告。今年初，联合国正式发起可持续发展目标行动10年计划，呼吁各方加快应对贫困、气候变化等。令人痛心的是，该计划刚刚启动，人类就遭遇了2战结束以来最严重的全球公共卫生危机。据阿斯卡近期发布的相关报告所言，新冠肺炎疫情正严重亚太经济社会发展，进一步加剧和社会不平等，为落实2030年议程带来挑战。在此艰难的时刻，团结合作是战胜疫情最有力的武器。多边主义是实现可持续发展的最正确选择。无论是落实2030年议程，还是抗击疫情，中方始终秉持以人民为中心的发展思想和人类命运共同理念。中方目前已在全国范围内有效控制住了疫情，并已全面复工。中方有信心在今年如期实现全面脱贫的目标，不让任何一个人对。这将是中方对全球落实可持续发展议程的又一重大贡献。中方愿加强团结合作，分享发展经验，共看时间，携手推动本地区尽快回归可持续发展的正确轨道。谢谢主持人。
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegation of China and also keeping strictly with the time limit. May I now invite the Honorable Minister from Turkmenistan? He's not online. Okay. The distinguished delegation from Bangladesh. Bangladesh, you have the floor. It seems Bangladesh is not connected. May I invite the distinguished delegation from Cook Islands?
Kirana.
We can hear.
Good. With respect to document SCAP/RFSD/2020/1, we note the Cook Islands is not referenced with respect to the data analysis conducted by the Asia Pacific Sustainable Development Goal Partnership. Important to note, we think, considering that we recognize from the Pacific region at least, the critical importance of accelerating actions, including to fill the data gaps and to leave no one behind. The Cook Islands is supportive of the priorities of the Pacific subregion as noted in SCAP/RFSD/2020/INF/1, in particular numbers 1 to 4 and 6. In particular, that there should be specific support for countries in carrying out capacity needs assessments for data and statistics availability in systems, and also strengthening statistics analysis and visualization. There is so much data in whole of government, but poorly managed. So there is a need for training of planners and policymakers. We also recognize the importance of ongoing support, not just one-off. Furthermore, COVID-19 has shown how important connectivity, ICT and telecommunications is, and investing in resilient and accessible, affordable services. We believe more support is needed in this area. However, on number 5, urgently shifting towards low emissions development pathways, we wish to reiterate the Cook Islands' position that shipping in the Pacific region is not a major contributor to GHG emissions, and considers that GHG emissions in shipping in this region needs to be balanced against the requirement to achieve all other SDGs under the development agenda. We are supportive of measures as developed under the initial IMO strategy on the reduction of GHG emissions and are therefore cautious about measures taken locally to mitigate against a global challenge, and one which as a region we ultimately have very little control over. We agree that because of COVID-19, health will need to be a higher priority in the Pacific. We also believe that COVID-19 has shot to the top of priorities Goal 8, decent work and economic growth, and Goal 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, with many of our economies, in particular the Cook Islands, in shatters. Facilitating urgent resource flows to LDCs and SIDS will be critical in the rebuild. For SIDS who recently graduated off the OECD DAC list as high income, we are now arguably worse off than many other countries in our region. A cogent reminder of the vulnerabilities.
Distinguished delegation Samoa, can you summarize please and conclude?
I'm coming up to the end, Chair. Just to make the point that that dependent almost exclusively on tourism, but now unable to access bilateral assistance due to this graduated high income status. This raises the need for inclusion into the discussion, to including promoting this, for example, fisheries or tourism. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegation from Samoa. I thank the distinguished delegation from Cook Islands. Now I will give the floor to Samoa and followed by the delegation of Azerbaijan. The distinguished delegation of Samoa, you have the floor.
Madam Chairperson, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank the Secretariat for the reference documentation on this and other agenda items. And the papers noting that the Asia Pacific region shows a mixed picture of progress and concludes that the region overall cannot expect to achieve Agenda 2030 without accelerated action. In that vein, conclusions about the subregions, including the Pacific, have also been drawn. Our country wishes to reiterate the priority actions for the Pacific, which are reinforced by the Samoa pathway, and these are climate emergency and disaster risk reduction, sustainable management and use of oceans and resources, regional integration, social inclusion and poverty reduction and gender equality, data policy, cohesion and partnerships, and health. Integration of the above of these priorities in national development plans and strategies, including our SDGs and our processes, with the support of development partners is critical. Similarly, development partners are urged to build national capacity systems and institutions for more effective public finance management. In our view, the priorities for accelerated action include filling data gaps so as to ensure that no one is left behind, enhance investment in social sectors and infrastructure in order to be on track towards low carbon emissions of development pathways, and reducing impacts of natural disasters. The current pandemic, the 2019 measles epidemic in the Pacific, have, like natural disasters such as Tropical Cyclone Harold, pushed back the development gains of the last few years. Though the majority of COVID-free countries are in the Pacific subregion, the socio-economic impacts pose enormous challenges to our small island developing states. We note that specific entry points have been identified to leverage and accelerate progress. Pacific countries have made significant progress across the range of these entry points. Even in our situation, in preparation for our 2020 VNR and reporting, we have expanded on the coverage of social protection measures in place and are working with the UN system to ensure that there are initiatives to respond appropriately to the impacts of COVID-19. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for keeping the time. I will now invite the distinguished delegation from Azerbaijan to be followed by the Honorable Minister from Turkmenistan. Azerbaijan, you have the floor.
Her Excellencies, dear Mrs. Samantha Jayasura, dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen. In the first place, on behalf of the National Coordination Council of Sustainable Development and the Minister of Economy, I would like to renew the assurance of my highest consideration to distinguished colleagues and the participants from regional countries, aiming the review of progress toward implementation of 2030 Agenda. At the same time, I extend my deepest acknowledgement to your Economic and Social Council for holding such productive discussions and for disseminating precision documents which enhance the vision, in-depth exchange and the different cooperational and the initiatives along the region. First of all, I would like to state some interventions about the document named Acceleration Along Transformative Pathways to Deliver Sustainable Development. As we know, the World Bank classifies the world economies into the four income groups: higher, upper middle income, low middle, and low. This classification based on the gross national income per capita, calculated using the Atlas method. A country's GNI per capita, which can change with economic growth, inflation, exchange risks, and the population. Revision to national accounts methods and the data can also influence GNI per capita. In accordance with method, countries with GNI per capita between approximately $4,000 and $20,000 are classified as upper middle income country. In line with this last released statistics of the World Bank, Azerbaijan as a country has a $4,050 GNI per capita. Taking into account above mentioned fact, I would like to state that to ask the Council to review the footnote of this document, where Azerbaijan stated as a low middle income country, which can contradict with the World Bank method, evaluation method. The second issue is related to achieved acceleration towards 6 transformative entry points noted in Global Sustainable Development Report and above mentioned document. It has to be noted that accomplishment Azerbaijan achieved upon these entry points are not assessed in this document. If this evaluation based on surveys or any questionnaire, please could you take into consideration for further assessment. The most important results achieved in elimination of extreme poverty and the reduction of the absolute poverty rate from 49% in 2001 and to 4.9% by 2015.
Azerbaijan, can you sum up?
What?
Can you conclude the statement?
Of course, I would like to ask that taking into account Azerbaijan is one of the countries of the world present VNR in HLP of 2017 and 2019. You may find out all progress achieved towards all 60 areas integrated to SDGs mentioned in these VNRs. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Azerbaijan, and I would very kindly invite all the distinguished delegations to stick to the time. I will now give the floor to the Honorable Minister from Turkmenistan, to be followed by Sri Lanka and then Thailand. Honorable Minister, you have the floor. We are sorry about this technical interruption. I will give the floor to the distinguished delegation from Sri Lanka, to be followed by Thailand and then Australia. Sri Lanka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Sri Lanka, can you hear us?
Yes, do you hear me? Do you hear me? Hello, do you hear me?
Is he connected?
Do you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen. So in fact, I'll limit my question. It's really a question to the SCAP really. Now we know that an unfamiliar new normal characterized by multiple uncertainties and socio-economic challenges has become the order of the day, or that's worldwide in fact. So this global pandemic is posing full changes to the global socio-economic landscape, with many countries still in lockdown mode, especially in Asia and Pacific. And the trends and socio-economic data that we base in setting this target and studies have changed significantly. So we will have to change our new targets. So I mean, we have set our targets based on the previous situation that we had prior to
Sorry, Sri Lanka, we can't hear you clearly.
All right. So I mean, with this new normal, we will have to plan our new targets, and we have to set our new targets with our country. So our economic situation has changed right now. So I mean, from the exact presentation, it's very clear that we are lagging behind in the sustainable economic part. So that means our economies are really very vulnerable, highly vulnerable. So in that situation, so what kind of a plan does the SCAP have to help the Asia Pacific region countries, especially the low-income countries, to plan out their
Sorry, there is some interruption that we cannot hear you.
All right. So I think, okay, I'll forward this question.
Sorry, Sri Lanka, if it is a question, maybe you can send it as into the, if it is a question, you can send it on to the chat box. So the Secretariat will pass it on to the relevant person who has been joining our discussion. Thank you very much. I will now invite Thailand, the distinguished delegation from Thailand, to be followed by Australia.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair. Thailand considers all the 6 entry points to be an effective means in accelerating progress towards the 2030 agenda. COVID-19 provides an opportunity for all countries to accelerate efforts for SDGs implementation and to build back better. Multilateralism and multilateral cooperation is needed more than ever, and Thailand commends the close collaboration between SCAP and ASEAN in moving forward the 2030 agenda. Last year's SCAP resolution on advancing partnership provides a basis for enhanced cooperation amongst SCAP member states. And Madam Chair, in searching for new and transformative ways of working post-COVID-19, Thailand would like to propose the following. First, our pathways towards sustainable development must be inclusive. As my foreign minister mentioned this morning, volunteers have a significant role by localizing SDGs and reaching those furthest behind. Women's equality and empowerment are also vital. Thailand encourages SCAP member states to share good practices on volunteerism and women's empowerment with others. Second, STI represents one of the key accelerators in increasing productivity and ensuring social and economic development. Thailand encourages SCAP to continue to work with member states and other stakeholders to provide countries with special needs with support to help strengthen their STI capacities, essential for building back better and staying on track. Third, sufficiency economy philosophy, Thailand's path towards sustainable development, placing humans at the center and emphasizing sustainability in all dimensions, has much to offer. With sustainability comes resilience to respond to a crisis and shocks. Thailand hopes to expand cooperation on the application of SEPs through bilateral, trilateral, and South-South cooperation, and encourages SCAP to provide member states with appropriate platforms whereby innovative homegrown development approaches could be exchanged. Lastly, Thailand values the VNR as it helps states identify progress made and remaining challenges in SDGs implementation. COVID-19 has disrupted development efforts and all segments of the population have been affected. Thailand believes that future VNRs should reflect how each country address socio-economic impacts of COVID-19, as well as strategies to build back better in the longer term. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Thailand, for fixing into the time. Now I have the honor to invite Australia to be followed by the distinguished delegation from India. Australia, you have the floor. Australia, are you with us?
Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and Excellencies. At last year's high-level political forum in New York, Australia recounted the remarkable progress made by regional partners, in particular our Pacific neighbours, towards the Sustainable Development Goals since 2015. A few examples: Vanuatu was the first country to undertake a regional peer review of its BNR process, leading global efforts to ensure accountability for SDG implementation. Fiji recorded its achievement of universal primary education. Nauru created a trust fund providing long-term sustainable revenue for future generations. Palau celebrated establishing a national network of marine protected areas. And Tonga worked to ensure early childhood education is inclusive for children with disabilities and other vulnerable groups. Since then, COVID-19 has seen the drivers of prosperity and the mechanisms to achieve the SDGs outlined in the Ababa Action Agenda become disconnected. Global trade routes, financing flows, and the movement of people around the globe for business, tourism, and study have been disrupted. This has led to major economic shocks, particularly harshly felt in small island developing states in the Pacific, who are expecting a contraction of around 6% of their GDP.
Australia? There seems to be some interruption, so in the interest of time, may I invite the distinguished delegation from India to be followed by Malaysia and then Pakistan. India, you have the floor. Are they connected? India? India, are you connected? We will invite Malaysia. Malaysia, you have the floor, sir.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to express my gratitude to the UN ESCAPE for hosting this event. I believe that this session is important to support the acceleration of action for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the regional level. Referring to Agenda Item 2, Paper 2.2, 5 years on, where do we stand? It is not that based on the 2020 assessment of Asia and the Pacific progress toward the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the region continue to struggle to advance in Goal 12 and Goal 13. This assessment also reflects in the 2019 SDG Global Index, which reported this region is regressing or stagnant as no information is available for both of these goals. I am pleased to report that Malaysia is committed to pursuing green growth and has continuously undertaken effort to achieve a low-carbon, resource-efficient, resilient, and sustainable economy. Therefore, we would like to highlight several initiatives undertaken by Malaysia related to Goal 12 and 13. So the first, in the midterm review of our 11 Malaysia plan, Malaysia continue to strengthen the enabling environment on green growth, which include governance, institutional framework, as well as capacity and capability. The adoption of Eco-Industrial Park, EIP concept, which supports sustainable consumption and production, SEP in existing and new industrial park to be more sustainable and competitive. Reducing the resilience on landfill by implementing 3R program. Malaysia is targeting 30% for 3R by 2020, which currently the 3R for measure is at 27%. Okay, leading by example through government green procurement, which was implemented by all ministry and agencies in Malaysia in 2017 for 20 products and services. Value of GGP increased from 137.7 million in 2016 to 286.3 million in 2017. This initiative will
Malaysia, will you kindly sum up?
Okay, as a way forward, we would seek collaboration with international agencies and other member states, knowledge and technology to further strengthen and foster our capacity building and skills in relevant areas that could assist us to achieve goal 12 and 13. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Malaysia. I will now invite India to be followed by Pakistan and then Indonesia. India, you have the floor. India? Looks India is not connected. May I now invite the distinguished delegation from Pakistan to take the floor? Pakistan, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I mean, not to make a national statement as was advised for this forum, but to, just to comment on the discussion. I think it is clear that on the achievement of the SDGs, we were already lagging behind last year. And what COVID has done has, it has further set back the socio-economic aspects. For way forward, I mean, there are so many reports, and as today's discussion also has put forward many points as to, looking into the future, how to build back better, the entry points for transformation. All of this is very useful. But I think I would just like to point out that a major challenge and a common strand in the implementation of past goals, that was true for MDGs and also subsequently for SDGs, is the financing for development. So, I mean, in the context that we are in, the shrinking of the fiscal space, the question as to how the resources will be made available, I think the delegation of Cook Islands and others also pointed this out. Obviously, countries are taking actions at national levels, but I think what has been pointed out by many, the aspect of global cooperation and solidarity. So my question is, how do the discussants and others on the panel look at it? This question of financing, how will this be addressed, and how do they see global cooperation and solidarity basically helping in addressing this key challenge for attaining the SDGs? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I will invite the distinguished delegation from Indonesia. Indonesia, you have the floor. Indonesia.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The COVID-19 pandemic is yet another challenge toward the realization of Agenda 2030 in the Asia-Pacific region and in the world. Its unforeseen effect on public health system and poverty are great. Like other countries, Indonesia is deeply concerned on the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on SDGs implementation. No more than ever, we are tested to leave no one behind. As such, Indonesia has set aside $25 billion and raised $4.3 billion through pandemic bonds to support healthcare measures, expand social safety net program, and stimulate economic recovery. The pandemic highlights the need for reflection and recalibration of our effort toward SDGs achievement. Leave no one behind should be our main principle while addressing hard social and economic issues during and throughout the recovery from the pandemic. Following policy recommendations are key to the prospect of SDGs in the region. First, leverage effort in the six critical entry point to accelerate SDGs and focus on the interlinkages between the goals to take advantage of co-benefit. Second, increase the scope and coverage of social safety net in response to the COVID-19 crisis and other future crises. Third, investment in an inclusive education system, universal healthcare, and human capital. Fourth, effective and robust fiscal policy. Last, strengthen and maintain political will for sustainable development. We urge all stakeholders in the region to scale up this effort and continue to support each other through exchange of the best practices, knowledge, and development cooperation. We strongly encourage international cooperation and multi-stakeholder involvement to help of the people while concurrently minimizing the economic and social impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, while keeping the long-term goal of achieving the SDGs firmly in mind. Therefore, it is crucial that UNESCAP continue to play their role in advancing regional dialogue and member states do not waver in their commitment to SDGs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Indonesia. May I now invite the delegation of European Union? European Union, you're not connected yet? Okay, I was told that the distinguished delegation from Bangladesh is now available. Can you take the floor? Bangladesh?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning from Dhaka. Bangladesh is a densely populated country with a population of 160 million, now trying hard best to manage the global pandemics of COVID-19, like all other countries of the world. On this COVID-19, all need to work together, help with each other on how we move forward. In this case, we are following the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, where first step is preparedness, second is emergency response, third is the rehabilitation to get the momentum of high economic growth and development back. If you look back, we see the Bangladesh did very well in the implementation of MDGs. Following its experience in achievement of the implementing MDGs, Bangladesh is one of the early starter of implementing SDGs under the dynamic leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina from the very beginning. Our stand lies with strong ownership and the political commitment from the top leadership. Implementation of SDGs is being coordinated by a high-level implementation and monitoring committee, which was established under the chairmanship of the principal coordinator under the Prime Minister Office. In its 6 5-year plan, which was implemented from 2011 to 2015, the country adopted many development issues which are very much synchronized with the many SDGs. The first flagship document government for implementing the SDGs was the 7th 5-year plan, which was started in 2016 and will be ended in 2020. Bangladesh aligned and targeted in many SDGs in this period. Now we are finalizing the 8th 5-year plan spanning from the 2021 to 2025 plan to accommodate many more targeted of SDGs. Madam Chair, in order to monitor the progress of the action regarding the SDGs, the government has established a monitoring and evaluation framework of SDGs, while it was targeted 3 milestones 2020, 2025, and 2030 for indicating the following the ending year of the planning cycle of 7, 8, and 9 5-year plan of Bangladesh. Bangladesh welcomed GSDR 2019 report as it was pointed out the 6 transformative area. Among them, Bangladesh has been identified as sprinter with relatively high level of achievement in 2 areas. One is the shifting towards the sustainable and just economies, securing the global environmental commons, but the COVID-19 made it more difficult the developing countries to achieve SDGs by 2030, and the acceleration need to be the 6 transformative areas. But it can also be an opportunity for every country to work together to make the crisis into an impediment to achieve it. Now we need the creative disruption, as the report suggested, which will be enable us bringing the new views and perspective to the table, replace and removing the ineffective formal and informal system through the creating the new ways of doing things.
Bangladesh, can you kindly sum up?
Yeah, I'm just going to. As Bangladesh is the predominantly, while achieving the MDGs and now SDGs, Bangladesh developed some good practices in achieving many socio-economic goals. Bangladesh is sharing of those good practices to other Asia-Pacific countries, which is the vivid example for South-South cooperation, and hope discussion from the forum will give us an opportunity to make other good experiences also. I thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, the distinguished delegation from Bangladesh. I have been informed that the delegation of Turkmenistan is now ready. So I will invite the delegation of Turkmenistan and also the delegations of EU and India. If you are ready, please be ready after the Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan, please have the floor. You have 2 minutes. Turkmenistan.
Honorable Minister, could you please turn on your camera and your microphone? We cannot hear you, sir.
Okay. Are they connected? The delegation of European Union or the delegation of India? Are you still connected with us, or European Union? European Union, you have the floor.
Thanks a lot, Madam Chair. I trust you can hear me now. Sorry, we had some technical problems.
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot. And Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, thanks a lot for organizing this meeting under these challenging circumstances, including from a technical point of view. I just wanted to use my 2 minutes for making a few comments. First of all, reiterate our commitment, the commitment by the European Union to deliver on the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This is a commitment that we will implement not only within the European Union, but also across the world, as the SDGs are at the very heart of our international cooperation with both third countries and international organizations. And the other point I wanted to make is the absolute necessity of cooperating at the global level. Multilateralism was a necessity. It has become a necessity even more pressing now if we want the world to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. And this has already been stressed several times today, and we definitely are fully behind this imperative. It is only by working together that we can deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals and on the recovery after this pandemic. As an example, you have seen the successful COVID-19 pledging conference that was called by the EU and the EU member states on the 4th of May, and which has allowed to raise 7.4 billion euros already. So together we can achieve a lot. And I wanted to also stress again that the main priority areas for the European Union, both at its internal and in its relations with the rest of the world, will revolve around 5 main areas: climate change, sustainable growth and jobs, migration, digitalization, and governance. So let me insist here, the Green Deal is an integral part of the EU strategy to implement the United Nations 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals and the other priorities announced by the President of the European Commission recently. So we will be putting sustainability and the well-being of citizens all around the world at the center of economic and social policies, and the Sustainable Development Goals at the heart of the EU's policy making and action. Now, it has been stressed already that the situation of the implementation of SDGs in the Asia-Pacific is a mixed picture. Progress has been made in poverty reduction and in other sustainable development goals. More remains to be done as regards other SDGs. But I would like to stress once again that the European Union will be cooperating both bilaterally and at the region-to-region level with the Asia-Pacific region at the best of its possibilities, including when it comes to financing. And I take the point made by the Pakistani ambassador was very relevant. We are currently discussing...
Distinguished delegation from EU, can you sum up?
I will sum up just by stressing again our continued willingness and political imperative to be cooperating with the Asia-Pacific region for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in the future. Thanks a lot, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for the distinguished delegation of EU. Is the Indian delegation connected? Because I think in my list, almost all the registered state members have spoken. Okay, I was told that India is not connected. So let me move on to the delegations from the major stakeholders. I will now invite ESBN. ESBN, will you take the floor? Mr. Asif Ibrahim.
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. As members of the Executive Council of the SCAP Sustainable Business Network, we are deeply concerned with the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on workers and enterprises, in particular, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, and emphasize the need to help those most in need, such as informal workers, women, migrants, refugees, and older persons. In this regard, we believe the crisis offers opportunities to strengthen the role of and collaboration with business in building a more sustainable Asia-Pacific region. As members of the SCAP Sustainable Business Network, we pledge to work with governments and the United Nations to help accelerate the delivery of the SDGs through enhancing our own sustainability, including by adhering to internationally recognized sets of principles and standards of responsible business conduct, like the United Nations Global Compact, and setting company-wide carbon emission reduction targets. We will use digital tools and platforms in enhancing resilience, including solutions for more effective and efficient supply chains, finance, sales, and back office functions to enable more flexible production and delivery of work, including working from home where possible. As the region is already the most disaster-prone in the world, we will also continue to work with SCAP to emphasize the need for resilience and disaster risk reduction, including through public-private partnerships for tsunami monitoring in the seas. We pledge to make businesses as sustainable as possible so that we do not lead to depletion or pollution of Earth's precious resources. SMEs are the backbone of the regional economy, accounting for 90% of businesses. We would like to call on regional governments to save our SMEs via speedy and immediate emergency fiscal and economic stimulus packages, which must be directly extended to the SMEs and their workforce in order to ensure their continued operations and save jobs and livelihoods. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, ESBN. And then now in my list is DWD Dalits. It's not taking the floor. Maybe we. Okay, now I will give the floor to Urban Poor. Urban Poor, the organization Urban Poor, are you connected? Now I will invite Women Arrow. Are you connected? Women Arrow.
Respected dignitaries, member states, I am Sai from the Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women, Arrow, and I'm making this intervention on behalf of Women's Constituency of APRSM. This intervention comes at a time when on more than half of the SDGs in the region, progress is either heading in the wrong direction or is stagnated. Despite progress, Southern Asia continues to account for nearly 58,000 maternal deaths in 2017, with young adolescent girls facing a higher risk of complications and death. 46% of women aged 20 to 24 in South Asia reported they married before the age of 18, and it is estimated that over 1 million of girls are vulnerable to harmful practices of female genital mutilation in Asia by 2030. Compared to other regions in the world, Asian women work the longest hours, as you see that. The COVID-19 crisis has further exacerbated and jolted the already slow progress on gender equality in the region. And we know that COVID-19 is not gender neutral, and it has a differentiated impact on women and girls. We call upon the member states to put in place an inclusive and feminist COVID-19 response and recovery national plans, but also an equitable post-pandemic future for women and girls in the region, embedded in the rights of gender equality, of human rights, and development justice. We call upon member states to institute feminist care economies and universal access to human well-being and capabilities through sound governance measures and multi-stakeholder collaborations. Governments need to ensure universal access to social security and universal health coverage, including for education as well. We call upon the member states to address the lack of sex disaggregated data in the region and ensure the practical implementation of progressive laws that around the women and young people. Finally, when the reality on the ground is such that a migrant pregnant woman, she is able to walk on the streets, and she's able to, go to her home place, and on the way she gives birth to a child. And that's when we actually know that there are no health services in place, and we know that things are not working for people, especially in these times of lockdown. And let's work towards the SDG transformation pathway. This needs reworking, and this is the time for all of us to reflect and act on the process. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for the representative of Women Arrow. Now, I think we have had a very good session, but before closing, may I know whether the delegation of India is ready? India? India, you have the floor. Distinguished delegations, excellencies.
Madam.
India, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for this opportunity for India to share its perspectives on the theme of the forum, accelerating action for and delivery of the 2030 agenda in the Asia and the Pacific. India is acutely aware that as home to 1/6 of all humanity, it has a critical role and responsibility towards the success of the 2030 agenda. With a view to making the decade of action very productive and decisive, India is taking a host of initiatives encompassing all goals and targets. Some key initiatives are highlighted here. As we focus on accelerating the progress on SDGs, the COVID-19 pandemic had spread across the world, including in our region, and is undermining action on most of the goals. It has to be stopped in its track for all our efforts on SDGs to come to fruition. India firmly supports joint global action to address the COVID-19 pandemic. It has extended medical assistance to several countries and operationalized the SARC COVID-19 Emergency Fund with an initial contribution of $10 million. Fighting its war against poverty and with a clear focus on economic growth and social inclusion, India has halved the incidence of multidimensional poverty by lifting 271 million people out of it. Considerable success has been achieved in improving access, affordability, and quality of sanitation, nutrition, and health services. Progressing towards universal health coverage, accessible, affordable, and quality healthcare has been institutionalized under Ayushman Bharat, which is arguably the world's largest health protection scheme, providing an annual cover of about $6,666 to 100 million families, or about 500 million individuals from economically weaker sections. The principle of leave no one behind is enshrined in the Indian Constitution. Social inclusion is the cornerstone of the National Development Agenda, which entails both legislative and executive action to universalize access to basic services and address the challenges faced by the vulnerable communities in the spheres of nutrition, health, education, employment, and social security. India is comprehensively addressing the climate action and environmental sustainability agenda by developing clean and efficient energy systems and resilient urban infrastructure, as well as implementing planned biodiversity conservation and eco-restoration measures. India has launched the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure and the International Solar Alliance to leverage global partnerships. One of the fastest growing emerging economies, India aspires to become a $5 trillion economy by 2025 with an inclusive and sustainable growth trajectory. Major reforms including a single good and services tax regime, FDI liberalization, insolvency and bankruptcy legislation, ease of doing business reforms, and flagship programs such as the Make in India, Startup India, and Skill India by the Government of India make for a robust engine of economic progress. Excellencies, the Government of India sets great stores of global partnerships and has always striven to spread amity and build regional as well as international networks. During the decade of action, India will only step up its effort to multiply cooperation and partnerships. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, the distinguished delegation from India. And also, I want to thank all of you for your contribution and for the excellent segment. And we are acutely aware that there were few delegations who couldn't connect. And what we would do is probably we will give priority for those delegations during the next session. So I will now conclude the first session of the 7th APFSD. I will now hand over to Ms. Rosemary Edleon, Undersecretary for the Policy and Planning Group, NEDA, Philippines, and Vice Chair of this 7th APFSD to chair and moderate the next session. Madam Edleon.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ms. Samantha K. Jayasuriya, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary and Permanent Representative of Sri Lanka to ESCAP and Chair of the 7th APFSD. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to chair and moderate this session, Opportunities and Entry Points for Accelerated Action. To open the session, I would like to request Dr. David Navarro, who has risen to popularity lately, to deliver his introductory statement on impacts of COVID-19 on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and insights into a post-pandemic recovery. Dr. Navarro, you have the floor, please. Dr. Navarro? Yes. Secretariat is Dr. David Navarro.
Madam Chair, Dr. David Navarro is connected. We see him, and please give us some seconds to ensure that he can hear us. But
Okay.
we see him connected, Madam.
Okay.
Okay, Dr. David Navarro, you're live.
Thank you. I'm so sorry I cannot connect. Something is wrong with the system, but I've been up for more than 1 hour here in Geneva, and I'm very pleased to connect with you. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I think everybody now understands that this is a dangerous virus. It is not flu. It is a very serious virus, and it is here to stay. And humanity everywhere is finding ways to exist with this virus. And I am personally really impressed by what I am seeing everywhere, with more than half the world in lockdown, with everybody coming to terms with the new reality of existing with COVID. It's changing what's happening in our communities. Businesses are adapting. Governments are really changing all their policies. Economies are being hit, but we're finding ways to be strong. And despite what you might read in the newspapers, there is extraordinary global solidarity between scientists, between health workers. Everyone everywhere is trying to find a way to live with this virus. Lockdowns are a temporary measure to reduce transmission, and they give governments and communities an opportunity to improve their defenses. But we in the World Health Organization want to make sure that the time and the distress of lockdown is kept as low as possible so that we can emerge stronger and ready to deal with COVID, reducing the risk that this virus causes sickness and disruption. And that's where the Sustainable Development Goals are so important. They put people at the center of development. And that is what, of course, we have to do to get on top of the virus. They put prosperity, but prosperity that is associated with equity and access at the center. And that is what we have to do to get ahead of the virus. The SDGs are all about partnership. And that is what we're having to do to get ahead of this virus. We will build forward better. We won't build back better. We'll build forward better. We will learn how to live with this virus. We will understand that we can only get on top of it through solidarity, ingenuity, and participation. I'm seeing poorer countries managing their COVID threats much better than some of the so-called developed countries. I've seen incredible community health services to break transmission of the disease functioning in many countries that are described as underdeveloped. But I'm also seeing big stresses for economies, for employment, and in particular impacts on women and children. To my last words, I know that many people and many governments are frustrated about the damage caused by COVID to their lives and livelihoods. I know that there is anger with the World Health Organization. There is anger with some nations. But please do not believe that this means that the World Health Organization has somehow stopped working for the people of our world. We are stronger and more committed than ever before. We are working for all of humanity without any bias, without any exceptions. We are helping to make sure that public health services, especially those needed for COVID and for other diseases are strong. We're getting supplies everywhere we can, with partnerships with the World Food Programme, UNICEF, and other UN agencies, as well as working with businesses, civil society, professional organizations in the biggest ever global multilateral response to a health crisis. Yesterday, 17 presidents, prime ministers, and world leaders like the chair of the European Union were involved in the World Health Assembly. Multilateralism is working, and we will support all nations with solidarity and with science and with solutions so that we emerge from COVID-19 into a new reality that is stronger and better based on the Sustainable Development Agenda. Thank you for the chance to speak with you, and I apologize that you can't see me because of the connection problems. Thank you. I'm staying on, connected until the session ends.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Navarro, not just for your insightful remarks, but also for the hard work that you and your colleagues at the WHO are doing at this time of the global pandemic. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as you just heard, the world needs to urgently change our dominant development paradigms, shifting gears and accelerating the transformation set out in the Sustainable Development Agenda. World leaders at the 2019 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Summit identified 6 transformative entry points to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs. These entry points are of crucial relevance also for the Asia-Pacific region. Our next speakers this morning will address how accelerated progress in these entry points can help countries in the region achieve the goals of the 2030 Agenda, including in view of the COVID-19 pandemic. The next 3 speakers will focus on selected topics embracing more than one entry point and highlight the need for integrated approaches towards acceleration. Afterwards, I will open the floor for interventions in response to all 4 speakers. Participants are requested to hold off requesting the floor until then. So now I would like to welcome Ms. Cecilia Jimenez Damari, United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights of Internally Displaced Persons, to speak on the topic, Leaving No One Behind, Reducing Inequalities and Moving Towards Sustainable and Just Economies through Prevention of Arbitrary Displacement and Avoiding Conditions that Foster Internal Displacement in the Context of Migration. Ms. Jimenez Damari, the floor is yours.
From the Secretariat, Ms. Cecilia Jimenez Damari, the floor has been given to you. Maybe you need to activate your microphone and camera, please. Ms. Cecilia Jimenez Damari from the Secretariat here, could you please activate your microphone and camera? Madam Chair, the Secretary is checking the connection of Ms. Cecilia Jimenez Damari. If you give us some seconds, please. Madam Chair, Ms. Cecilia Jimenez Damari requests that we will go to the next speaker so she can solve her technical problem.
Yes, okay. Yeah, that's to be expected. We're still transitioning to the new normal. We're not yet there. So now we will be hearing from Dr. Shenzhen Fan, the Senior Chair Professor at China Agricultural University. So Dr. Fan, our concern is this: despite productivity increases, undernutrition in the region persists. So at the same time, you have malnutrition linked to unhealthy diets that has become the leading risk factor for the global burden of disease. I then request you to share your thoughts on the topic of enhancing agricultural and food value chains. The floor is yours, Dr. Fan.
Even before the COVID-19, the Asian Pacific region is already facing multiple challenges, multiple burden of malnutrition. 500 million people in the region suffer from hunger. 77 million children are stunted. And 40% of our population in the region is either overweight or obese. So the COVID-19 will add more burden, will set back some of the progress that we have already achieved for the last 2 or 3 decades. Yes, we can do things differently. We must rethink what sort of food system we would like to have in the future. So from the policy side, how can we really make sure that the current government spending can support more nutritious, healthy, more diverse food production, and make sure that smallholders will be part of that solution? Now, from technology side, in the future, the technologies, new technologies must have multiple wins. Yes, wins on yield, wins on there's a tolerance against all the shocks, and wins on nutrition, so multiple wins. So now, obviously, COVID-19 will again shock our food system. So now in technology, yes, absolutely. We needed to adapt it to new normals, for example, the internet, e-commerce. But here I wanted to emphasize this so-called 3 C's of this new normal, new technology. C is connectivity. Yes, here in the region, we have many people who have connection to internet. But in many countries, particularly in the Pacific Islands, maybe part of South Asia, the people still do not have connectivity. The second is the capacity. Even the people have connectivity, but if they don't have the capacity to use internet or e-commerce as a way to improve their production, their livelihood, it will be no use. The third one is the content. So where the government role comes in. So government and the private sector to some extent must provide content for whether it's consumers or smallholder producers or anybody in the supply chains can access to that content to convert that into opportunity to improve their livelihoods. Now, the behavior is also very critical. I do think the COVID-19 is a wake-up call. Now, we have eaten probably too much sort of a calorie or junk food, but not much nutrition and healthy food, like fruits, vegetables, beans, and so on. And also, I think that people will begin to pay attention to its wet markets. Well, I don't think the wet markets will disappear. I do think wet markets will continue to have a very big role in feeding the population here in the region. I think the question is whether we can introduce better regulation, better law to make sure that the diseases will not be able to jump from animals to humans or from nature to humans. I also think the government behavior must change. We have seen that some countries in the region have used export bans to safeguard their own domestic supply. I think this is very bad. Many speakers have already said that we are in one world, we must work together, and we must make sure that we do not use export bans to starve our neighbors. And in fact, it could also hurt back to the countries which initiated the food export bans. So here, as economists, as a food policy analysts, we are really thinking how we can really rethink of our future system. Here are the 2 keywords. What is the resilient? So we have seen more frequent, more severe shocks So our food system must be resilient against all these shocks. Second, inclusiveness. Make sure that smallholder producers, informal traders, and even poor consumers must benefit from our food system, and make sure that food system will be able to provide nutritious and healthy foods to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fan, for your insights. Yes, indeed, I agree. COVID-19 is a wake-up call to all of us. We need to be resilient. We need to rethink our systems, especially the food system, make it more resilient to the numerous shocks, but at the same time inclusive. So moving on, I would now like to welcome Honorable Bisja Roro Esti Widjaputri, Member of Parliament, Indonesia, Air Quality Asia. The path to sustainable development runs through cities, towns, and human settlements. And key to addressing urban poverty and inequality is providing access to basic services such as affordable housing and electricity. So, Honorable MP, I'm pleased to hand over the floor to you now to speak on the topic of securing basic energy services in Asian cities while advancing the transition to renewable energies. Please.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Chair, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. First and foremost, thank you, UNESCAP, for having me in today's session. It truly is a shame that we're not able to convene in person, but I'm truly honored and grateful to be a part of such a distinguished panel. My name is Dia Roro Esti, and I'm currently a member of Commission 7 at the Indonesian Parliament, which basically oversees the energy, environment, research, and technology sectors. I'm also the Secretary of the Green Economy Caucus at the Indonesian Parliament, which seeks to create a sustainable future for Indonesia through policymaking, and also a member of Air Quality Asia. And so with that being said, and of course in light of today's topic, I'd like to shed some attention to the current pandemic that we are faced with today, focusing primarily on how that's impacted economic growth, the lives of communities, and also overall energy demand with the steps required to basically just move forward, right? And as we know, the coronavirus or COVID-19 has spurred both a global health and also economic crisis. Up to date, there are nearly 5 million cases with more than 300,000 deaths globally. And quite frankly, this is a very frightening reality to be faced with. And given our current economic condition, we also see that the poorest is being hit the hardest, right? And the World Bank projects that at least 11 million people across East Asia and the Pacific falling into poverty, even under the most optimistic scenario, right? And it's also led to an increase in community marginalization due to the increase of income divide. And I've also read a report recently by the UNDP on the social and economic impact of COVID-19. And quite frankly, we also see it on a daily basis, whether it be in Indonesia or countries across Asia or even around the world, where it argues that the pandemic is causing massive job and income losses and has affected quite substantially people working in the informal sector, accounting for 1.3 billion people in Asia and also the Pacific, right? And so this pandemic, on hindsight, has also affected energy accessibilities in several ways. So many power plants constructions are put on halt due to determination on construction activities and also supply chain systems. For example, in Indonesia, the National Electricity Company has stopped or delayed many power plant projects as a result. However, the good news is that one thing I learned about the pandemic is that humans are very adaptive creatures, right? Particularly in situations where we are forced to adapt, right? And For example, things like simple things like having to work from home, which has forced us to optimize on technology and has forced us to really just turn our homes into comfortable working spaces. And for me personally, this was a little difficult because, you know, I used to try my best to not focus on work at home. So really just having a good work and life balance. But with that being said, you know, now we are forced to be able to manage both in the comfort of our own home. So it's in a way also, it's caused us to slow down from a fast-paced, always moving way of life. And that gives you a whole different perspective on life in general. So these are just some of the social benefits that, that comes with it. And this innate ability to adapt, in my opinion, should be further applied after the pandemic subsides, right? Particularly in translating the Sustainable Development Goals into reality under the premise that we can no longer survive in continuing to use the business as usual approach when it comes to achieving sustainable development. Economic growth in this regard must be achieved by also taking into account both the social and also the environmental factors. And as the global economy starts to heal itself post-pandemic, we're expecting to see an increase in economic activity and also economic growth, with the hopes that this will also lift people out of poverty, which in turn increases energy and electricity demand globally, right? And the optimal outcome in this scenario is really just for us to be able to shift the national energy mix of nations across the Asia, and the Pacific region or around the world, which in this case is primarily at the moment dominated by fossil fuel, to more sustainable sources or measures, right? So for example, we can attempt to make fossil fuel more environmentally friendly through processes like coal gasification or liquidification, but also more optimally opting for renewable energy, right? And so the implementation of renewable energy needs to be heavily supported by regulation. And so political will from nations across the globe is very crucial. And as we know, 183 countries have ratified the Paris Agreement, or the COP21 Paris Agreement, which has been translated into the nationally determined contributions. Indonesia has also ratified this agreement, and we have a goal, particularly in the energy sector, of achieving 23% renewable energy by 2025. And as of 2020, Indonesia, we're currently at 9.15%, where fossil fuel is still, dominating. And also the electricity generation capacity from renewables, right now we're still at 12.2%, or accounting to 10,169 megawatts. So this is just some of the hindsights of where we are as a nation at the moment. And with that in mind, countries should start optimizing on the comparative advantage in which regions have when it comes to renewable energy generation, right? So in Indonesia, just to update, we have successfully included the renewable energy law or policy through Commission 7 at the Indonesian Parliament, and it's become one of the priorities. And we hope that this will speed up renewable energy generation in the region. And as I said, political will is very essential to get things done. And also this will hopefully pave way for job creation in the sector. And lastly, I'd like to kind of just end my speech and my intervention by sharing something that I've learned, which has really just shaped the way that I view the world and approach problems faced at the national and also global level. So when I was in college, I studied at Imperial College London at the Center of Environmental Policy. And I remember constantly being bombarded with the idea that, a multidisciplinary approach needs to be taken in tackling a global problem such as climate change. And it's made me realize that essentially this is a team effort. And as long as we are able to get everyone from all sectors on board with a particular mission, we will be able to achieve things at a much faster rate. And so this applies for anything, whether it be moving from the, moving away from the pandemic, or how to survive in moments of crisis, to even climate action and renewable energy optimization. you know, and we have a saying in Indonesia, and it's called gotong royong, which means essentially working together side by side in order to achieve incredible results, whatever that may be, you know. And so with this in mind, the government, CSOs, academias, private and public sectors, the youth, everybody has a role to play, and everybody's homework here is to really just figure out what your role is in the change you wish to see in the world. And it's in this very essence of gotong royong will we be able to survive and reap optimal results going forward. So this is just a message that I'd like to share with everybody present today. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Honorable MP Jaroro ST. In Indonesia, you have the term gotong royong. In the Philippines, we have the term bayanihan. So indeed, we need all heads together. Like climate change, it's a global phenomenon, and this pandemic is also a global phenomenon. So I was informed that we cannot get Ms. Cecilia on the line. May I just get confirmation from the Secretariat on that?
Madam Chair, the Special Rapporteur is online, and we will give her the floor.
Oh, okay. So Ms. Jimenez Damari, the floor is yours, please.
Hello, good morning. We're very sorry for the technical speaking before you as the UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights of internally displaced persons, and myself belonging to the Asia Pacific region. I am very pleased to understand the progress in the achievement of the sustainable development goals in this backyard. Particularly the scientific approach employed by states and civil society has been very good and has to be commended. At the same time, the reason we are here today is because much more needs to be done, especially in the midst of the current pandemic. The title of the session, Leaving No One Behind, is therefore, however, no rhetoric. It is a reality that millions of people in the Asia-Pacific region face as governments and civil societies strive to collaborate to achieve societal and transformation through the entry points elaborated by the GSDR report. It is striking to me in my mandate, which deals with vulnerable populations, specifically internally displaced persons, that the entry points of 1, human well-being and capabilities, and 2, sustainable and just economies are issues for which vulnerable populations actually struggle most with. Conditions that generate much of the poverty, exclusion, marginalization, and even discrimination for these vulnerable groups are actually susceptible in generating arbitrary internal displacement as well as forced migration. These conditions result to millions of people around the world, including our region, people who are not at home. In places where they may be found, whether they are IDPs or migrant workers, they usually also face hardships amounting to access to basic human rights and living decent lives. The combination of the first 2 entry points are relevant in this regard, as these are entry points that must be tackled at the point of origin in the very first place. The human well-being and capabilities of our people are the human resources of every territory that must be harnessed for the society's well-being. The GSDR identified that eradication of poverty and reduction of inequality as interrelated challenges that need to be tackled head-on. Indeed, Groups of people are vulnerable precisely because they are usually poor and has an equal economic and social status in their communities. Thus, reducing the gaps for opportunities and the rights between social groups who are most at risk of being left behind in their own territories is indeed necessary, as the report emphasizes. Access to education, for example, has been growing in the past year in the region, thanks to educational policies of states in the region. More children are going to school, more teachers being trained, more resources being poured into infrastructure, etc., etc. And yet we find groups excluded, poor and marginalized. More targeted approaches are necessary to ensure that education reaches these children. For example, rather than merely expecting them to go to schools, education must go to them. This is always a challenge, but very indispensable to ensure that present and future generations will be productive members of our societies. The COVID-19, unfortunately, has now put just that one risk, the right to education, in peril. Education is just one aspect. And of course, there are other conditions that drive people into arbitrary displacement and forced migration. Violence and lack of safety and security, lack of livelihoods and unequal economic opportunities, and others. Therefore, social and economic policies for the transformation into sustainable and just economies need to incorporate the specific geographical particularities where these vulnerable groups and sectors come from, and social and economic requirements of the people themselves, regardless of their ethnicity, religion, language, or race. For example, agricultural policies that generate food sufficiency must be assured. And this is not only with regard to social groups, but also for women. And also economic growth must definitely include them. Last but not the least on this, seriously tackling environmental degradation, as the former speaker has said, that foster the loss of economic opportunities has to also be done. Such inequalities, deprivations, environmental depletions, just to name a few, and often coupled or resulting to violence, rights violations, and insecurity, are among the drivers of arbitrary internal displacement and forced migration. Again, consciously incorporating displacement conditions and the needs of the vulnerable populations into national and local policies is essential. And we have been trying to do this, but at the same time, targeting the specificities for them to access economic opportunities and benefit from socially just policies are also indispensable. This is now more urgent because of the pandemic. And we all know that, unfortunately, the gains that may have been achieved in the past few years are at risk of loss, if not already being lost, because of the COVID-19 pandemic. This includes policies and endeavors addressed to mitigate the effects of climate change and natural hazards that our region unfortunately suffers on a regular basis. The current pandemic provides us the reminder that strong and well-resourced public systems, such as, for example, for health, housing, food, education, and social protection, these are basic human rights, can provide the strongest response to calamities, shocks, and hazards with the guaranteed access of members of vulnerable populations. Indeed, climate change hazards will be with us, and we already are suffering from them. It is for this reason that my next report to the UN General Assembly will be on climate change and internal displacement, to which I invite states, civil society, UN agencies to provide input. Lastly, in all these challenges to states, civil society, and societies, to all of us, that we need to continue to address, I take note of one sentence that is most important in the GSDR report. It states, quote, "People are the greatest asset in the fight for sustainability." the best state policies that can address human well-being and capabilities and foster sustainable and just economic systems are people-centric. Since I was appointed in 2016 by the UN system as an independent human rights mandate holder, I have emphasized time and again the indispensability of the participation of IDPs in decisions that affect them. This adage holds true in attaining sustainable development goals, especially now during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, on this, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, let us just go out of our region briefly and let me bring to you all a wise saying from the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria. And it says, you cannot shave a man's head without the person being there. This is the same for policies that states and work that civil society undertake in our collaborative effort to bring the sustainable development goals to reality and leave no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Madam Special Rapporteur. Thank you for your message of bringing home that SDG is not just about sustainability, it's about having just societies and especially leaving no one behind. And yes, having universal access is really about reaching out to those who are being left behind, to the vulnerable sectors. And especially now with the COVID-19, we're seeing a lot more of these vulnerabilities. So thank you once again to all our speakers for this session. So your remarks have underscored the urgency to accelerate action and to align policies for a timely realization of the agenda, while also addressing the impacts of COVID-19. So I hope this session will raise the momentum for acceleration in the region, illustrating the successful implementation of strategic policies and ultimately contributing towards the achievement of the UN Decade of Action. So now I will turn over the floor to the chair for the interventions from the representatives that are present here. Madam Chair, turning it over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Rosemary Idlion, the Undersecretary for Policy and Planning Group of NIDA Philippines, for your excellent conduct of the session. Distinguished delegates, let me make a brief announcement. From now on, we will work without interpretation. The interpreters will join us with the next session after the break. So, to continue with the interventions, I will now open up the floor for the representatives of member states, major groups and other stakeholders and international organizations. The participants may request the floor using the request to speak button. So in my list, we have Vietnam, the distinguished delegation from Vietnam. Are you connected with us? If so, you have the floor. Vietnam, can you hear us? Vietnam, we can't hear you. We see you, but we can't hear you. Vietnam, we can't hear you. Is your microphone connected? while we try to get connected once again with the distinguished delegate from Vietnam, may I kindly invite the distinguished delegation from Iran, and I also being made to understand that we will have the delegations from Tuvalu and also Turkmenistan wanting to take the floor. So if you are still with us, please be prepared. I will give the floor to the distinguished delegation from Iran. Iran, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Madam Chair, on behalf of my government, I should explain my appreciation to you for holding the meeting amid all this uncertainty. I hope you all healthy during this unexpected coronavirus pandemic crisis. Far as well, we are aware COVID-19 pandemic is interconnected with degradation of biodiversity and manifests how human health is associated with plants' health. Furthermore, its dire consequence on achieving the SDGs are indisputable that a call on global strategy recovery seems inevitable. Such as attending to the creating green jobs, greening fiscal and finance packages to achieving SDGs is very important. According to the levers for transformational change, we believe financial and technological gap can minimize the effects of any attempt to harness the synergies on transformative change need for implementing SDGs that comprise a complex interplay with the governance. Also referring to the paragraph 17 of ministerial declaration of the high-level segment of the 2016 session of the ECOSOC, voluntary national reports can promote the enhanced our efforts to ensure that no one is left behind and emphasize to the importance of building national capacities for follow-up and review. Iran not only supports VNR's preparation, but also emphasizes that it should be prepared in regional level because of different consequences in different regions for implementation of SDGs. Concerning our national progress, Iran has invested at their average in providing well-being for the public and has improved the HDI, maternal and child mortality rate, agriculture index, adolescent literacy rate in the past years, despite all the economic challenges result of sanctions. Iran also has to grapple with its highly complex environmental issues, such as land degradation, water scarcity, biodiversity loss, waste management, standard assessor, and climate change. Besides CSL conflict in West Asia, which evaluate insecurity and impurified decision makers, the impacts of the common environmental challenges we encounter, especially sand and assessor, transboundary rivers, and water management, a new path.
Distinguished delegate from Iran, will you kindly summarize and conclude?
Sure. Which treats our biodiversity. At the end, we express our hopes that we all pledge the international social solidarity as a morality factor for achieving the SDGs. We also hope no potential political leverage could result in any attempt to float fundamental principle of the SDGs, leaving no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The distinguished delegation of Vietnam, you have the floor. And I also in the same vein invite, if the delegation of Tuvalu or Turkmenistan is connected with us, they can take the floor after Vietnam. Vietnam, you have the floor. Vietnam, are you with us? We can see you, but we cannot hear you.
Let's go to Nepal.
Nepal, the distinguished delegation from Nepal, can you connect with us right now? Nepal?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead. The distinguished delegation from Nepal, you have the floor.
Thank you, ma'am. Distinguished delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, namaste and good morning. It's a great opportunity for us to speak in front of you on behalf of Nepal. After the adaptation of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, Nepal presented its first voluntary national review in 2017. The various efforts to implement the sustainable development goals at the nation and sub-national levels and on integrating the SDGs in national development frameworks have been carried out since then. This will be the second time for Nepal to be presenting the national review at the high-level political forum 2030. We prepare a draft of progress assessment report based on which we are preparing the Vienna 2020. Various high levels committee have been formed to help implementing SDGs, and we have been working through those all the levels. Nepal made commendable progress on reducing extreme poverty. In the health sector, current trend indicates that progress has been made on reducing infant mortality, maternal mortality, and child mortality, amongst others. The current availability of resources indicate that there is a huge gap to finance the achievement of SDGs. As we all know that due to the COVID-19 outbreak, the manufacturing, constructions, hotels, and restaurants, wholesales, and retail trade, as well as transportation sectors of the economy are being the most affected. Remittance are likely to decrease, affecting the overall economy. The pandemic will affect several socio-economic indicators such as income, poverty, employment, and economic growth. The financing gap will further widen, and achieving SDG by 2030 will tend to be more difficult for us. The other prominent challenges with us to achieve the SDG 2030 implementation.
Distinguished delegation from Nepal, can you conclude the statement by summing up?
Yeah, so after all, we have some problems due to the COVID-19. The main problem is, we have our preventive measures of the manufacturing, construction, tourism sectors, restaurants, hotels, transportations are highly affected, and remittance are likely to decrease, affecting the domestic demand, BOP, and overall economy of the country. So our indicators also will be affected on income, poverty, employment, growth, and financial gaps will further, as we have spoken before. So achieving 2030 will be more difficult for us, and also the government has set up a goal to graduate from LDC in 2024, and
please, I think we are way behind the time. Please conclude.
Taking this agenda to fulfill it in a time, and I hope we need to have one coordination system mechanism of our with our colleagues and development partners to cope up with this ongoing, unpredicted, prolonged problems, simultaneously, collaboratively, and commonly.
Yeah. Thank you very much, distinguished delegate from Nepal, for your intervention. I will now give the floor for 2 minutes each for the following major stakeholders and the UN. IGES, are you with us? Are you connected? IGES? and then after IGES, the trade union, to be followed by UNEP. IGES, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm Kazuhiko Takeuchi, the President of IGES. I would like to extend my deep sympathy to those suffering from COVID-19. While COVID-19 has indeed been a tragedy, I also think it underlines that the work we are doing to deliver on the SDGs is more vital than ever. This is partially because COVID-19 is a result of unsustainable human interactions with natural systems. COVID-19 spread also reflects to a large extent the negative impacts of rapid globalization. Let me begin with an issue where I see significant opportunity for addressing a harmonious relationship between people and nature, that is biodiversity. The unprecedented rate of biodiversity loss is limiting future technological and medical solutions. This is particularly worrying as the world works on a COVID vaccine. To help these trends, we need global efforts to raise the ambition of target in the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Next, let me turn to the related issues of climate change. Though calls for climate ambition and 1.5-degree targets are often made globally, achieving these objectives will require a solution that are linked to other development priorities. Integration between climate change and air pollution issues, sustainable transport, waste management, food, water, energy, gender, and to return to the familiar theme, biodiversity conservation, are all areas that should be a priority in our region. The next step, of course, is to translate the potential for more integrated approaches to these issues into tangible actions. All of the above areas will be aided by easy-to-use decision-making tools, interlinkages, and nested multi-level governance arrangements. Both the tools and the transition to more nested governance arrangements could be a part of an effort to work on what we are calling in Japan a local circulating and ecological sphere between rural and urban areas. This also provides a useful framework for promoting greater integration between voluntary national reviews and nationally determined contributions, as well as the local climate policies and voluntary local reviews. To conclude, I would like to emphasize Asia-Pacific region still faces enormous challenges from the interactions between the natural environment and human activity and rapid globalization. However, firmly believe that this crisis can help all of us reorder priorities so that we live more harmoniously with nature, even in an increasingly globalized world. For the full set of IGES recommendations and key messages for APFSD and our recent position paper on COVID-19, please visit our website. Thank you very much, and wishing you all good health. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the distinguished representative from IGES. I will now invite the trade union. Distinguished representative from trade union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before starting the intervention, I would like to express our solidarity to workers on the front line to fight COVID-19 and to make our work moving by providing essential products and services at greater risk. I want to highlight what normal was before the pandemic for 2 billion workers in Asia Pacific first. It was persistent decent work deficit, 356 million workers still in poverty, 1.3 billion informal workers, and rampant violation of workers' rights without social dialogue and adequate social protection, to name a few. These deficits have been a main driver behind persistent systematic barriers described in the chair's statement to hinder the progress of the SDGs. The COVID-19 pandemic has accentuated these systematic barriers deeply rooted in labor market. Therefore, without addressing labor issues, the barriers would be perpetuated with higher precariousness, inequality, and discrimination further exacerbated by the pandemic. Therefore, not only for accelerating transformation in Asia Pacific towards the SDGs, but also for tackling the current health and economic crisis, the decent work agenda should be at the center of our immediate and decisive measures to prioritize employment retention and income support with extended social protection. Also, the decent work, which is linking to all 6 entry points as a core part of 4 levels for changes, should be respected to reconstruct a new and better normal to ensure our post-COVID-19 truly inclusive, resilient, and sustainable in line with the 2030 agenda. This can only be done by building trust in governance systems and institutions, ensuring just transition with green jobs for climate, strengthening public services, formalizing informal economy, eliminating labor exploitation in labor migration, as well as in food global supply chains. And last but not least, increasing confidence in the future with the new social contract on the basis of fundamental workers' rights, social dialogue, and social protection for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the distinguished representative from Trade Union. And I will now invite the distinguished representative from Older People Empower. You have the floor. Mr. Shankar, are you with us, connected? The distinguished representative from Older People Empower.
Madam, we'll conclude.
It seems not the case. On behalf of the moderator of this session to Undersecretary Rosemary Edleon of Philippines, the Vice Chair of 7th APFSD and my own, I would like to thank everyone who has taken the floor and also to our distinguished speakers for their contribution for an excellent session. Before I conclude, I would like to hand over the microphone to the Secretariat of the Forum for some housekeeping announcements and to make some information about the logistical arrangements of this new way of connecting. Ms. Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Many thanks to you and the Undersecretary from the Philippines for your very capable chairing. Madam Chair, we would like to resume with the proceeding of the APFSD at 1:30 p.m. on this platform. So we will be taking a 1-hour break. The Secretariat would like also to inform you that all the delegates are invited to participate in the virtual launch of the SDG report that will begin in 3 minutes at 12:30 at the link that it's going to be posted in the chat box. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, and I will conclude session 2 and hope to see you all in the next session after the break. Thank you.
Can you confirm whether Sohail is online? I don't see him in the list, but he says he's online.
I cannot see him. If he's online, I'd be grateful if you turned his camera on, please, Professor Sohail.